Romanian Eagle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276 Romanian Conditions. Prime Minister Bricianu returned to the Prime Minister's office. After consulting with Edel, Prime Minister Bricianu, who returned to the Prime Minister's office, did not rush to open the document bag that the king gave him, but concentrated on dealing with many affairs of the government. Because he knew that, if he read the document bag that the king gave him, he would probably be full of negotiation, and he would not be able to do the government work this afternoon, so it was not too late to go home and read. After a busy afternoon of government work, Prime Minister Bricianu returned home in his car. After receiving greetings from his family, Prime Minister Bricianu returned to the study, and after instructing not to disturb others, he opened the light blue file bag. In the negotiating conditions carefully prepared by Edel, the Allies were given a boundary along the Tisza River, extending to the eastern Carpathian Mountains and southeastern Galicia, Lviv, Ivano, Chernovtsi, as well as the southwest corner of Ternopil and the southwest corner of Khmelnytsky are also included. According to Prime Minister Bricianu's estimate, this is a territory larger than Romania, but I don't know how the Entente will react to it. Of course, this is a territory of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Edel knows that the Russian provisional government cannot agree to this condition, but he is also preparing for the future. As long as the Soviet Russia and Germany sign the Brest Peace Treaty, then Britain and France will ask Romania to sign this condition. In addition to territorial conditions, Edel also prepared political and military conditions. Among them, the first political article, signing a peace treaty with the Allies, must ensure that Romania gets the territory it deserves in the terms of the terms. If there is access to the Allies, it cannot sign a peace treaty with the Allies. This is Edel's guarantee that the Entente will write down words in the future, and it is also the basis for obtaining normality for new territories in the future. Article 2. When deciding on a peace treaty, the 5 countries of Great Britain, France, Russia, the United States, and Italy have equal status with Romania, and have no superiority or inferiority. This was also what Edel had prepared carefully, in order to improve Romania's position in the war. Otherwise, in the future Paris Peace Conference, Romania is likely to be assigned the same second and third rate status as the Republic of China at that time. This is very unfavorable for improving Romania's political and military status, and it is also something Edel tries to avoid. In terms of military conditions, Edel intends to use the Allied forces relying on the port of Betrayal. He planned to attack Romania while the Allied forces, which were still facing off against the Bulgarian army, could launch an attack to contain Bulgaria's return. Here is a little more about the situation of Greece. After the Entente forcibly landed in the Greek port city of Betrayal, Prime Minister Venizelos strongly advocated that Greece join the Entente to gain benefits. But it was always opposed by King Constantine, who advocated maintaining neutrality. And the king, in order to be neutral, also dismissed the Prime Minister Venizelos. So in 1916, the former Prime Minister went to Betrayal to set up a new government, completely ignoring the neutrality principle of Athens. So 2 governments appeared in Greece. After the time entered 1917, Britain and France decided to increase their control over Greece. So in May of this year, there was a lot of remarks in Greece, accusing King Constantine of maintaining neutrality, because he received a private gift from his relative Kaiser Wilhelm II. These remarks were inadvertently expanded and spread throughout Greece. In the face of the public's remarks, King Constantine knew that this was forcing himself to step down, and the mastermind behind it must be the Entente group. However, in the face of such accusations, Constantine knew that this was the coercion of Britain and France. If he continued to prevent Greece from joining the war, then it is estimated that the popular riots would not be far away. You must know that Greece has always been deeply controlled by the United Kingdom. Now it is even less capable of breaking away from the control of the Entente. This can be seen from the landing of the Allies in the port of Betrayal, where the Greek army does not fire a single shot. According to information obtained by Edel, I heard that the king is planning to abdicate and let his son inherit the throne. However, what is the specific situation, which requires further information? Prime Minister Bricianu is watching. After Edel gave himself the Romanian final conditions, he burned it in a brazier. Looking at the documents that burned to ashes, Prime Minister Bricianu sighed, and the conditions the king gave him were difficult. It is difficult for the allies to agree to these contents, especially Russia will never agree to Romania's acquisition of Galician territory. Now we can only slowly continue to talk with the Entente countries, and I hope that the Entente countries will not be very angry when they see it. After the ambassadors of the 3 Entente countries received the terms of Romania's participation in the war issued by the Prime Minister, they all looked at each other in dismay, especially the Russian ambassador Firilovsky showed great anger. Because of Romania's request, he did not care about Russia's attitude at all, which made Ambassador Firilovsky very embarrassed. Even Russia, which was hanged up and beaten by Germany and Austria after the revolution, is not something that Romania can humiliate like this. That's right. That's the word on Ambassador Firilovsky's mind right now. In front of the British and French ambassadors, Ambassador Firilovsky couldn't help roaring, "Damn Romanians, do they still have Russia in their eyes?" In the face of the anger of the Russian ambassador, the British and French ambassadors looked at each other, and finally the French ambassador Frank, who succeeded Jane Budd, told him, "Your Excellency Firilovsky, calm down and don't be so angry. We are also dissatisfied with Romania's conditions, but the most important thing for us is to send Romania's conditions back to China." The French ambassador's words calmed Firilovsky's mood a little, and the British ambassador, Franley, who succeeded Richard Mann, also spoke up. "These Romanian people are so rude. We've been talking with them for about a year, and we still insist on our own terms. Now it's better to add more terms. I really don't know why the government is so used to these Romanian people." Facing the speech of the British and French ambassadors to help him, Ambassador Firilovsky observed that it did not seem like a fake, and it seemed that Britain and France were still on the side of Russia. So he said smoothly, "These Romanians are too procrastinated, they don't do things at all, and they have too much appetite. I think we can mention our government to suppress the arrogance of the Romanians." If the Russian ambassador tried, he was immediately dismissed by the British ambassador frankly. "I think it is serious to send Romania's conditions back to China first. In response to Romania's measures, I believe the government will give us instructions. I agree." Seeing that the British and French ambassadors did not make any suggestions, Ambassador Firilovsky had no choice but to give a speech. "Then I'll send a telegram back to the embassy first. Goodbye." Goodbye. Ambassador Firilovsky looked at the inactive French ambassador and had to leave first. It seems that the Russian Revolution, combined with this fiasco, has in every way slid it down from the big 3. After seeing the Russian ambassador leave, the British ambassador frankly spoke to Frank. "London sent a telegram asking me to increase my wooing of Romania." Ambassador Frank, who understood what Ambassador frankly meant, replied, "Paris sent me the same telegram." It seems that Britain and France are also worried about the chaos in Russia, but as long as Russia is willing to continue fighting, I believe that Romania is only a backup option for Britain and France. Then it all depends on the development of the political situation in Russia, but the situation in Russia is a bit bad at the moment. Chapter 277 Kornilov Rebellion. The current situation in Russia is indeed not a little chaotic, but quite chaotic, especially in St. Petersburg, which is now counted as a riot of demons. Kerensky witnessed the defeat of the Russian army and destroyed the remaining prestige that he and the provisional government had on the front lines. The evil results of the previous purge of disaffected officers in the army have appeared. The soldiers and the army were completely desperate for the interim government and began to find a way out on their own. Many of them were drawn over by the Bolshevik party because the truce they preached, allowing everyone to return to their hometowns, was an extraordinary attraction to the soldiers at this time. The Bolshevik party saw an opportunity. The day after the bad news of the war came back to St. Petersburg, they organized a march of 30,000 people. In the parade, the Bolshevik party took the lead, enchanting the slogan "Peace, bread, not war." For this reason, the Russian provisional government was afraid of another January revolution, and quickly mobilized the troops still loyal to the government on alert, and at the same time, sent negotiations with the Bolshevik party. The interim government gave the posts of the Minister of the Interior, as well as the Minister of Justice. Faced with the conditions set out by the interim government, most of the high-level people were satisfied in this negotiation, because they could all see the huge role these two positions play in the Bolshevik party. But Lenin, as a leader, completely disagreed with this, because unlike other high-level leaders, they only saw the benefits and ignored the dangers. Joining the provisional government means that the Bolshevik party has given up its biggest advantage, which is the identity of the opposition party. As a revolutionary leader, Lenin had an excellent vision. He had long seen that the current chaotic situation and collapsed economy in Russia could not be solved by changing political parties, but needed to stop the war and lick the wounds. As for the high loan from Britain and France, he still has only a vague idea, but now he first needs to dispel the idea of cooperation with other members of the senior management. The current provisional government only gives two positions, which does not meet Lenin's expectations. In his opinion, the current provisional government, a multi-party political combination, cannot adapt to the current situation in Russia. The Bolshevik party is fully capable of ushering in a new era in Russia, which is also Lenin's expectation and viewpoint. To this end, Lenin specifically looked for Dzerzhinsky, who is one of the three major spy agencies in later generations, the founder of the famous KGB, the Soviet Proletarian Revolutionary, and the master of Red Terror. Dzerzhinsky. At that time, the organization with the sword and shield pattern headed by him was also called the All-Russian Anti-Revolutionary Committee, or Cheka for short. But these are the images he gave to the world later. As for the current Dzerzhinsky, he is the most popular leader of the Bolshevik party. This is from when the Bolsheviks founded the party and elected the Central Committee members. Later, the actual leader of the October Revolution and the founder of the Red Army, Trotsky, won the third vote, and the founder of the Soviet regime, Lenin, won the second vote, and the one who won the first vote was Terrell. Rinsky. So Lenin knew that, as long as he got Dzerzhinsky's approval, he would get the rest of the party to agree with his ideas. Sad to say, as the founder of the Bolshevik party, Lenin did not have a high degree of support within the party, which also has a lot to do with his long-term exile or expulsion. Don't you see Yuan Zun, the helm of Biang, who has only been away for 3 years, and can only rely on prestige and other means to control Biang, which was unimaginable before he became ill. Compared with Lenin, it is still good, of course. This also has a lot to do with belief. After a night of conversation, Dzerzhinsky was finally persuaded by Lenin. So the next day, Dzerzhinsky used his prestige to persuade others. Iron Felix is not just what his comrades and comrades call him. Even those who are hostile to Dzerzhinsky call him that. So with Dzerzhinsky's help, Lenin's voice in the Bolshevik party about whether to negotiate has greatly increased. So the interim government, waiting for a reply from the Bolshevik party, received a reply that refused to stop the demonstrations. It's just that the interim government has transferred troops loyal to itself to St. Petersburg, in addition to negotiating with the Bolshevik party. So after Bolshevik refused, the interim government decisively suppressed the demonstration. In the face of heavily armed soldiers, the public is certainly not an opponent. After causing more than 400 casualties, the demonstration was suppressed. Facing the promoters of this demonstration, many high-ranking members of the Bolshevik party were also arrested. Only its main leaders were not caught, and Lenin fled to Finland, at that time in a semi-independent situation, where he completed the writing of the state and the revolution. And the familiar text Lenin by the Lake is about this. In addition, the interim government is still in contact with other members of the military, but this is mainly done by Minister of the Army and Navy Kerensky. Because of the fiasco of this offensive, Kerensky knew that his prestige in the army had been reduced to a terrible point. The main commander, Brusilov, has almost consumed his prestige accumulated in the Brusilov offensive. Now the interim government desperately needs a commander who can boost morale on the front lines at this time. A commander came into Kerensky's line of sight. That was General Ralph Kornilov. After the outbreak of the war, he was appointed as the commander of the 9th Siberian Division, and soon transferred to the commander of the 48th Division. He gave the division the title of the 48th Steel Division, because he was particularly good at defending. After the German breakthrough into Gorlitz began, He was ordered to the rear, and despite his best efforts, half of his division was scattered, and he was unfortunately seriously wounded, and fell into the hands of the enemy captive point. After entering the prisoner of war camp, he escaped twice without success. The third time he drank a lot of water, which caused his heart rate to accelerate, and was transferred to the prisoner of war hospital, where he changed into an Austrian military uniform, and escaped side of the front. His escape was such a sensation, that even the Tsar met him in person, awarded him a heroic medal, and the media even promoted him as a national hero. In 1916 Lava Kornilov was appointed commander of the 25th Infantry Corps on the Southwest Front. After the January Revolution of 1917, the head of the State Duma, the big landlord Leo Diank, appointed him as the commander of the Petrograd military district. He rose at a dazzling rate, appointed commander of the 8th Army on April 6, and promoted to general of the infantry on April 23. After Kerensky's May offensive collapsed, he was promoted to commander of the Southwest Front on May 8 to restore the situation on the ground point. But what makes him most famous is a telegram he sent to Brusilov, the then commander-in-chief of the Russian army in the provisional government, after he took over as commander of the Southwest Front. In the telegram he demanded to Brusilov that he would use all means to restore order. He banned soldiers from gatherings, repealed the Soldiers' Manifesto, shot deserters, laid their bodies on the side of the road, and wrote the crime point. The Russian newspaper published his secret telegrams, and for a while, Lava Kornilov became the savior of the capitalist and the possessed, and on May 19 he was appointed commander-in-chief of the Russian army. It needs to be mentioned here that when he was the commander-in-chief, his chief of staff was Anton Ivanovich Denikin. However, during his tenure as commander-in-chief of the Russian army, Lava Kornilov did not get along well with the provisional government, because the new commander-in-chief demanded almost dictator-like powers. Kerensky, who had served as the interim prime minister and minister of the army and navy, was greatly dissatisfied. Tragedy is bound to happen between the two tough guys and fighters, so Lava Kornilov served as the commander-in-chief of the Russian army for just over 10 days. On June 3, he was dismissed from his post by the interim government and imprisoned. This news greatly dissatisfied its supporters, the 3rd Cavalry Army. So on June 9, the 3rd Cavalry Corps advanced towards St. Petersburg, and the 3rd Cavalry Corps claimed not to obey anyone but Kornilov, and dispatched assault battalions and armored vehicles to the capital to demand the resignation of the interim government. At this time the provisional government was at a loss, because St. Petersburg did not have enough troops to resist the advance of the 3rd Cavalry Corps. Because after suppressing the marches led by the Bolshevik party, the interim government will remain loyal to its own troops to the front line, to maintain the morale of the already collapsed Russian army. You must know that the German-Austrian coalition will not miss such a good opportunity. The collapse of the Russian front line under the German-Austrian attack continues to expand. In order to maintain the front line, the provisional government could only send out the few remaining troops that were still loyal to the government. At this time, the actions of the 3rd Cavalry Army led to the lack of sufficient troops by the provisional government to suppress it. The provisional government suddenly realized that the Bolshevik party had enough influence among the soldiers and workers that inviting it back would suppress the insurrection of the 3rd Cavalry Corps. So the decision to bury the provisional government and give birth to the First Red regime was made in this way. With the help of the insurrection of the 3rd Cavalry Corps, the Bolshevik party returned to St. Petersburg, but this time the Bolshevik party was not so easy to deal with. Because of the previous crackdown by the provisional government, the party's support for Lenin to continue the revolution grew louder. The Bolshevik party, which now controls more than half of the military in St. Petersburg, is about to grab the provisional government's throat, but I believe that day will come soon. Chapter 27 August Revolution. After Lenin returned to St. Petersburg with the Bolshevik party, Edel kept a close eye on the situation in Russia. In fact, European countries are now paying attention to the situation in Russia, but they will not think that Russia will leave the battlefield in an unexpected way. After the Bolsheviks returned to St. Petersburg to repel the insurgent 3rd Cavalry Corps, General Kornilov, the source of the rebellion, was released. As a compromise agreement between the two parties, Kornilov went to appease the emotions of the 3rd Cavalry Corps in exchange for his escape from prison. Anton Ivanovich Denikin, who was mistaken for his gang as chief of the general staff, was also released together. So the unfortunate General Denikin had to leave the post of chief of the general staff and become a real deputy to General Kornilov. After solving the problem of the rebellion, the military power in St. Petersburg was gradually mastered by the Bolshevik Party. At this time, the senior officials of the provisional government, who had found that the situation was not right, planned to make a fuss about the Soviet regime. Soviet, meaning meeting of representatives or meeting. Because during the Russian Revolution of 1905, there was a Congress of Representatives organized by striking workers as a strike committee, referred to as Soviet. Soviet is a transliteration of Russian, English, Soviet, which means meeting of representatives. Originating in the Russian Revolution of 1905, it was a form of direct democracy for workers and soldiers whose representatives could be elected and replaced at any time, implying a Paris Commune-style form of power in the earliest Soviet governments. The Mensheviks and other left-wing parties played a major role. Among them, Plekhanov was the chairman of the Soviet, Kerensky was the deputy chairman of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, and the Bolshevik Party played little role in it. But after the first reorganization of the provisional government, the Mensheviks and the Socialist Revolutionaries and others focused their attention on the provisional government. They all hoped that, by participating in the provisional government, it will gradually transform into a left-wing government model. It has to be said that they almost succeeded. After the Kornilov rebellion was quelled, the interim government reshuffled the government cabinet for the 3rd time on July 29th. And this time, most of the provisional government is formed by left-wing party members, and the all-socialist government once advocated by the Bolsheviks is about to be realized. Only then did these left-wing parties realize that the Bolsheviks had already taken the Soviets into their own hands, and that the force that allowed Bolsheviks to control the Soviets came from the military. In the Soviets, which were not by universal suffrage at that time, the voting rights of soldiers were more than 10 times higher than that of workers. There were only Soviets of workers and soldiers deputies at that time, and peasants were not counted, and the Mensheviks' leadership in the Soviets was replaced by Bolsheviks at this time. The Bolshevik Party had basically infiltrated the military forces around St. Petersburg. With the exception of a few places such as the Winter Palace, where there are still armed forces loyal to the government, the Bolsheviks have taken full control of the military in St. Petersburg. Now all it takes is a wave of the Bolshevik Party's arm, and this ripe fruit will fall into its hands. At this time, however, other voices emerged in the Bolshevik Party. Zinoviev and Kamenev opposed Lenin's plan to seize power by armed force. The main reason was that they not only opposed it verbally, but also informed the provisional government of the time of the armed seizure of power among the Bolsheviks. Lenin, who has been busy for the Bolsheviks to seize the highest power in Russia, almost vomited blood after hearing the news of the two people's whistleblower. So he hurriedly asked Trotsky, Dzerzhinsky and others to discuss at this time. It is impossible to retreat, and everyone only discussed a way to launch in advance. And so on August 19, 1917, the Bolshevik-led revolution began. At this time, the army loyal to the provisional government in St. Petersburg was less than 30,000, while the Bolsheviks organized an army of 200,000, but most of them were workers, and even if the workers were deducted, it was more than twice that of the provisional government. Many soldiers in the interim government army are shaken, which has a lot to do with the unconditional peace talks propaganda by the Bolsheviks, because the largest anti-war group in Russia at the time was the soldiers. The Bolshevik slogans touched the hearts of these soldiers. So before the battle, the Bolshevik army had the advantage. Lenin secretly came to the uprising headquarters, Smolny Palace, personally led the armed uprising. From the night of August 19, 1917 to the morning of August 20th, more than 200,000 soldiers and insurgent workers quickly occupied various strategic positions in Petrograd. At 1 am on the 20th, the uprising troops occupied the General Post Office. At 2 o'clock the Baltic Railway Station and the Nikolaevsky Railway Station were captured. The lighting circuit in the government building was then shut down, and the telephone bureau cut off most calls to the interim government and the command. Around 6 o'clock, The Red Guards, soldiers, and sailors had occupied the palace bridge. Except for the Palace Square and Isakivska Square, almost all other areas were in the hands of the insurgents. Prime Minister of the interim government Kerensky fled in a panic in the car of the US Embassy. At 10 o'clock, the Revolutionary Military Committee distributed the information to the Russian citizens drafted by Lenin, announcing that the provisional government had been overthrown, and the power had been transferred to the Soviets, after occupying the Palace Bridge. Except for the Palace Square and Isakivska Square, almost all other areas are in the hands of the insurgents. Prime Minister of the interim government Kerensky fled in a panic in the car of the US Embassy. At 10 o'clock, the Revolutionary Military Committee distributed the information to the Russian citizens drafted by Lenin, announcing that the provisional government had been overthrown, and the power had been transferred to the Soviets. As for the scene of the attack on the Winter Palace, according to gossip, there was no armed conflict near the Winter Palace that night. There were only one women's battalion, and one sergeant's camp guarding the Winter Palace. Surrender. Palazinski, the chief of defense of the Winter Palace, opened the gates of the Winter Palace himself, and took them to the place where the ministers of the provisional government were meeting. The Aurora cruiser, on the other hand, was being overhauled, and loaded and unmanned. Bereshev, the commissar of the temporarily appointed Aurora, fired only a few blank rounds, without warheads, at the Hermitage. On the night of the uprising, the Petrograd Military Revolutionary Committee issued a notice on the overthrow of the provisional government, stating that the uprising was victorious without shedding a drop of blood. This made Edel, who was waiting for a good show, a little bit wrong. He said that the bloody battle of the Winter Palace had overwhelmed the provisional government. How could this happen? However, after putting down the telegram from the Romanian embassy in St. Petersburg, Edel needed to step up the preparations of the army, because according to his estimation, due to the time difference, Russia would not wait until 1918. Frigid weather dragged it down. Chapter 279. Russia withdrew from World War I. After the August Revolution in Bolshevik overthrew the provisional government, the then Allied bloc was full of fears for the nascent Red Party. At that time, the British Special Report on the Revolution was carried out. In the report, the Times said pessimistically that the seizure of Russian power by the Red Parties this time is a threat to countries throughout Europe, and also called on countries to be vigilant about the development of the Communist Party in various countries, so as not to fall into the tragedy of Russia. As the most influential newspaper in Europe, it has always advertised itself as objective reporting. But the August Revolution led by Bolshevik did not reveal its hostile attitude towards the Red regime. Compared with the ethics of being a big newspaper with an image, you can't show your own opinions too much. Other newspapers are not so implicit. At that time, when most of the newspapers reported on the August Revolution in Bolshevik, they repeatedly said that the Communist Party was persecuting the Russian people in St. Petersburg. There are also many newspapers digging out various problems during the Paris Revolution. They exaggerated and told their readers. Some newspapers even called on the two major groups that were at war to stop the war and put out the Russian Red Revolution first. These are the bourgeoisie of all countries, reacting to the fear of Russia for the first working class regime. However, the Allied governments at that time did not adopt a hostile policy towards the newly established Soviet Russian government, because they also needed a large number of troops from Russia to hold Germany and Austria. In the face of the goodwill extended by the Allied powers, the Soviet Russian government is now completely indifferent, because they are busy dealing with the bad domestic situation. At present, the poor food supply in St. Petersburg has become the top priority of the new Soviet government. After all, most of the military forces of Bolshevik are here at this time. Moreover, it is also the political and economic center of Russia, the revolutionary holy land of the new Soviet Russia, and a place that Bolshevik cannot lose. The new Russian government, which overthrew the provisional government and left only the Soviet regime, still has many members of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, the Cadets, and the Mensheviks within the Soviet regime. The reason for this result is that the revolutionary slogans led by Bolshevik oppose the provisional government, and another reason why Bolshevik should not be too explicit, that is, other left-wing parties did not have a numerical opinion on Bolshevik. Many disadvantages. This has a lot to do with the fact that Bolshevik was too radical in the Russian left-wing party before. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin in Tsarist Russia before, were the political groups that it focused on attacking. Because Bolshevik is about to overthrow the Russian government in the slogan, Bolshevik, whose long-term leaders are abroad, is much less attractive to Russian progressive youth. Even after the January Revolution, the Bolsheviks tried their best to develop and expand the organization, and other left-wing parties made foolish moves, but they still did not allow them to occupy an absolute advantage point. In addition, the new Soviet Russia still showed a desire to fight for the Allies. It can only be said that the Russians are now completely tied to the Allied chariots by Britain and France, even if Russia has collapsed for this reason. Now Britain and France are willing to continue to cooperate, as long as Russia is willing to continue fighting. For this reason, the then British ambassador Bristow also expressed to the Soviet Russian government that the Allies were concerned about the current situation in Russia, but the main thing was the Soviet Russian government's attitude towards whether the war would continue. You must know that when Bolshevik was in the opposition, he shouted the slogan of armistice loudly. In fact, negotiations with the Germans were taking place within Bolshevik as the main leaders of Bolshevik, but clearly remember what they rely on to come to power. Now the most powerful anti-war group is the military group with guns. If these soldiers are not satisfied, it is not difficult to change the political party to govern. Therefore, after initially easing the tension in St. Petersburg's supply of materials, Bolshevik was discussing matters about a truce with Germany. Therefore, when the British and French ambassadors asked the Soviet Union about the war against the Allies, they were disappointed. To this end, the British and French ambassadors sent a report to the country. It is recommended to expand support for other political parties in Russia. This has also brought great relief to other Russian parties, who see this as a death of Bolshevik. Without the financial support of Britain and France, Russia's finances can collapse just by paying off its foreign debts. Faced with this situation, they certainly would not kindly remind Lenin and others that they intend to defeat Bolshevik in the next election and regain the power of the Soviets. It's just that they don't know that Bolshevik is not as obedient as they are, and that Lenin, as its leader, goes farther than they think. 5 days after the August Revolution, the nascent Soviet Russian government handed over to Germany its willingness to negotiate peace talks. This greatly encouraged Germany, so a copy of the terms of the German peace talks was sent to the Soviet government. The conditions in Germany gave the Bolshevik top brass, who were still newcomers to the regime, a blow. Germany proposed to cede parts of Poland, Lithuania, and Estonia and all of Latvia and Belarus to Germany and Austria, and to pay 3 billion rubles of indemnity. And the reparations must be paid to the Allies in 5 installments within 1 year, otherwise the Allies have the right to raise funds on their own. Faced with the negotiating conditions in Germany, the Bolshevik party was agitated and demanded to stop negotiations with the Allies. Among them, Bolsheviks' opinions are divided into 3 categories. The first is that the left communists represented by Bukharin opposed the signing of the peace treaty and advocated continuing to fight against Germany. His reasoning was that German conditions were too harsh, which would put the nascent Bolshevik at a disadvantage in future elections. And as long as the fighting continues, it is very likely that revolutionary sentiment will be ignited among the German and Austrian workers in the future. In fact, they were reluctant to fight because of the harsh conditions in Germany. Central Committee members Bubnov, Uritsky and Lomov supported Bukharin. The second category was represented by Trotsky. He advocated a truce, demobilized the army, but did not sign a contract with Germany. In fact, Trotsky was also opposed to accepting Germany's conditions because he knew the state of the Russian army and continuing to fight would be too harmful to the new regime. Central Committee members Krestinsky, Dzerzhinsky and Yufy supported Trotsky. What followed was Lenin's proposal to accept Germany's conditions and sign a peace treaty. Because Lenin knew that the main problem of the current Soviet Russian regime was the domestic problems that needed to be solved and about to break out, because there were too many thorny problems accumulated in Russia now, and these were carefully sorted out by the new Soviet Russian regime. Lenin's proposition was supported by 6 members of the Central Committee, including Divinoyev, Sokolnikov, Stalin, Artem, Stasova, and Sverdlov. Now the 3 parties are in dispute over the German plan. On September 1st, the Soviet Russian government convened a meeting of the central and local leaders. At the meeting, attended by 0 people, 32 people agreed with Bukharin's proposition, those who agreed with Trotsky's proposition, and only 5 people who agreed with Lenin's proposition. In the end, Lenin's claim failed to pass, because it was in the minority. The attitude of the Soviet Russian government greatly dissatisfied the German side, and Hindenburg and Ludendorff, who wanted to take this opportunity to solve the Eastern Front, were also disappointed. Regarding the attitude of the Soviet Union, the two were actually preparing for it. Ludendorff, who presided over the work of the General Staff, mobilized 4 more divisions from the Western Front during this period, and transported most of the ammunition to the Eastern Front in recent months. Troops after Soviet Russia refused to negotiate. More than 2 million German and Austrian troops rushed into the Russian hinterland along the Great Plains of Eastern Europe. However, the Russian army guarding these places did not become brave and good at fighting, because of Bolsheviks' blessing. At least 100,000 soldiers from the Russian front line disappeared and fled in just a dozen days of attack, and nearly 200,000 soldiers entered the POW camp in Germany. In the face of a very critical situation, Soviet Russia once again held a central meeting on September 25 to re-vote on the issue of signing the contract. Trotsky's proposition passed by a majority of 9-7, and Lenin's proposition was still not accepted by the majority. Negotiations resumed in Brest. As the People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs and head of the negotiating delegation, Trotsky agreed with Lenin before leaving that he would make concessions and sign a contract if Germany gave an ultimatum. Because both of them knew that it was not an option to drag on like this, Russia could expect to see the victory of the Allied powers, but the Bolshevik regime would definitely not see this result. As a result, Germany really gave an ultimatum to Soviet Russia. Trotsky telegraphed to Lenin asking for countermeasures, and Lenin immediately returned the telegram to accept the German conditions and signed the contract immediately. But at this time Trotsky's feat of cherishing feathers was committed, because he knew that if he signed this treaty, he would always be subordinate to Lenin. So instead of accepting Lenin's suggestion, he issued a statement refusing to sign the contract and led a delegation to leave Brest. As a result, Germany began to aggressively attack Soviet Russia again. By the time Germany had attacked Pskov, which was less than 300 kilometers away from St. Petersburg, on October 9, the situation was very urgent. The grievances of the army were almost unstoppable, and the voices questioning the Soviet Russian regime were also constantly ups and downs. At this time, an emergency meeting of the Central Committee of the Soviet Union was held. At the meeting, Lenin's proposition was rejected by a vote of 7. Subsequently, the Central Committee held a meeting overnight. After a heated debate, Trotsky turned to support Lenin. The meeting passed Lenin's proposal with 7 votes in favor, 5 votes against, and abstentions. The Soviet Russian government notified Germany overnight that it agreed to sign the contract. However, Germany did not stop the offensive after being notified, and on 2000 imposed more severe conditions. The Central Committee of the Russian Party of the Soviet Union held an emergency meeting with 5 members. At the meeting, most of the members expressed their disapproval of Lenin's proposition. Faced with his painstaking efforts to be completely unsupported by the members of the party, Lenin was furious and had no choice but to propose that if such empty talk continued, he would resign and retire from the government and the Central Committee. Bukharin didn't care. Trotsky disagreed with Lenin, but his attitude changed in order to prevent Lenin's resignation and the split of Bolshevik. Under his influence, there were 4 abstentions. As a result, Lenin's proposal was adopted with 7 votes in favor, 4 abstentions, and 4 votes against. So on October 4, the Soviet Union government finally sent a negotiating delegation to negotiate with Germany. On October 2, the peace treaty between the Soviet Union and the Allies in Brest was formally signed. According to the contractual agreement, Russia gave up all territories of Finland, the Baltic states, Belarus, and Ukraine, not to mention. Soviet Russia also needed to cede Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Courland, and Russian Poland to Germany. At the same time, the Turks, who were defeated 10 times in a row by Tsarist Russia, took back the regions of Ardahan, Kars and Batumi without a fight. This means that Russia will lose 20,000 square kilometers of land, which occupies 1/10 of Russia's total territory and is all in Europe, so the population above is very dense, accounting for 44% of the country's population. Russia's resource advantage, which used to dominate the pack, will also be greatly weakened. Coal mines and iron ore will lose 75% and 73% respectively, along with 54% of industry and 33% of agriculture. In addition to these, the Soviet Union also needs to pay 7 billion marks in war reparations like Germany, and it can only be divided into 5 installments, and the last installment must be delivered within 1 year of signing the treaty. The treaty would give the nascent Soviet a rest, but this was obviously not acceptable to all Russians. Losing so much population and industry, the entire treasury must also be repaid within a year. In addition, in the election of the Constituent Assembly, the Bolsheviks openly overthrew the election organized by themselves because they received fewer votes than the Socialist Revolutionary Party. So left-wing political parties organized workers to stage a demonstration that day to protest against the dissolution of the Constituent Assembly. The Bolsheviks sent troops to suppress it, causing the January 5th massacre that shocked the world. In Gorky's words, the rifle has dispelled the dream that Russia's best element had fought for nearly 100 years. A large number of Russian nationalists turned against the Bolshevik organization, and hardcore patriots like Kolchak were even more outraged. In their eyes the Soviets became traitors, more disgusting than the Germans, and were ready to eradicate them at all costs. And so the Russian Civil War broke out. Chapter 280 Negotiations leaked. Part 1. The August Revolution led by Bolshevik not only changed the country and the world, but also changed people of all kinds. The people who feel the most in Romania can only be the people from the Russian embassy in Romania, among which the number 1 and number 2 figures in the embassy reacted the most. Ambassador Ferilovsky and Councillor Andrei Danton suffered the most, because the current chaos in Russia made it impossible for them to continue their diplomatic work. In fact, after the August Revolution, St. Petersburg did not send any missions to the embassy. Now that St. Petersburg doesn't give money, what should we do? In Ambassador Ferilovsky's office, Councillor Andrei Danton was irritably expressing his dissatisfaction with the ambassador. Don't worry about Danton, just wait for a while. We have to trust St. Petersburg, they will take care of us. Ambassador Ferilovsky took a sip from the glass and persuaded Andrei Danton. It's happened before, hasn't it? It's okay not to mention it before, and when I mention it, Andrei Danton said in a loud voice. After the coup in January, the new government only remembered to send funds to our embassy in March, and it only paid half of it. It didn't supply us at all for the first 2 months. If it hadn't borrowed a little money from the British and French embassies, we would have to wait. Let's go begging in the streets. We haven't paid the money back to our embassy yet, and now we have to wait. Who are we going to borrow money to keep the embassy running this time? Looking at the excited Mr. Danton, Ambassador Ferilovsky took another sip of wine. In fact, he knew why the councillor was so excited. His Excellency Danton had 2 or 3 lovers in Bucharest, and the pressure of life was not small at all. Moreover, many personnel in the embassy are not as small as the councillor, so he can understand the complaints of Andrei Danton. He understands, but he doesn't have a solution. Now, the cost of running the embassy is what worries him. As the embassy of a country and a great power, it is impossible to stop its operation because of insufficient funds. For Ambassador Ferilovsky, this will also be a difficult thing to talk about. So he was worrying about the embassy funding, and he could only appease the councillor first. Your Excellency Danton, you also know the current situation of the embassy. If St. Petersburg does not issue funds, we can only do it ourselves, or borrow it from the British and French ambassadors. Facing Andrei Danton's question, Ferilovsky shook his head and said, it's impossible to borrow money from them anymore, especially after the attitude of the government has changed, and now we need to find ways from other places. Any solution? Looking at himself, the councillor who is not very smart, Ambassador Ferilovsky just continued. Do you have a way to borrow money in Bucharest? It turned out that Ambassador Ferilovsky planned to borrow a sum of money to make a turnaround. Andrei Danton asked curiously. How much do you need to borrow? 1 million lei will do. Andy keyed. And then what do we use as collateral? How about the vehicles and office supplies used by the embassy? Seeing that Ambassador Firilovsky is unfamiliar with the loan business, Andy keyed and popularized it. Your Excellency, the sum of what you said is not worth 500,000 lei, and no one is willing to lend it to us. Unless you add something else. You mean? Andy keyed and thought back in his mind. Where is there any valuable stuff in the embassy? It is impossible to mortgage the embassy area, which was purchased and built by the Russian government and has been recorded in St. Petersburg and the Romanian government. There was no other valuables in the embassy, and suddenly he thought that there were still items that could be mortgaged in the embassy. The building behind our embassy for accommodation was built with the funds of the former ambassador. It is unlikely that St. Petersburg would know about it. We can simply convert it into a hotel and then mortgage it. I believe I can borrow 1 million lei. Ambassador Firilovsky's eyes lit up with Andy Danton's words. He knew more about the dormitory building at the back than Andy keyed on, so he could follow this plan. Ambassador Firilovsky, who was much more relaxed in his heart, pulled Andy Danton to speak. Dandan, your attention is very good, which eases the financial constraints of our embassy. Ambassador Firilovsky poured a glass of wine and handed it to Andy Danton, who then clinked the glasses and drank it. I didn't expect you, Andy Danton, to be very talented in these things. This is a great help to me. In the face of praise, Andy Danton said politely, Your Excellency Ambassador, don't be so polite, I can help you in these places. Then the two started chatting while drinking. Ambassador Firilovsky and Councillor Andy Danton chatted all over the world. When talking about the British and French ambassadors to Romania, Ambassador Firilovsky, who had been drinking a lot, began to swear. Richard Mann and Jane Bard completely disregard our alliance and our friendship, and I will not be called to negotiate with Romania these times. Faced with the word negotiation that came out of Ambassador Firilovsky's mouth, Andy Danton immediately raised his attention. He said sideways, That's really not right. No matter how much Russia sacrificed for the war, we shouldn't be excluded. Yeah, when I negotiated with Romania before, the three of them were together. After the first coup in St. Petersburg, they began to alienate me, and they stopped calling me in the second coup. And Romania unreasonably asked for the area reserved by our country, they to think about, while Andy Danton was listening intently. Ambassador Firilovsky fell asleep while talking. Looking at Ambassador Firilovsky, who was halfway through speaking, Andy Danton could only give up the questioning, even though he was suffering in every possible way. He remembered that, after being pulled into the water by the German chancellor, his first request was to investigate the negotiations between Romania and the Allied powers. Now that he can't ask about this situation, he can only reset the information another day. On the second day, Andy Danton was in the Roma Club, telling the information he had just obtained to the German Councillor Masnow. After listening to Andy Danton's report, Councillor Masnow paid great attention to it. He opened the drawer and took out a stack of banknotes with about 20,000 to 30,000 lei and handed it to Andy Danton. It's best to find out about Andy Danton, and we'll all be much better off that way. Andy Danton skillfully took the banknotes and nodded. I'll do my best. This time I can't do my best. We must investigate clearly. Councillor Masnow knew that this time he had to give Andy Danton a big reward. This guy only cares about money now, and he has to work hard for this job. As long as the investigation is clear this time, we have prepared $250,000 for you, and can send you out of Europe. The figures revealed by Councillor Masnow made Andy Danton swallow his saliva. After thinking about it, he said with determination, I've done the job, but I want $300,000. Councillor Masnow thought about it. Yes, but we need to get this information within a month. No problem. After sending Andy Danton away, Councillor Masnow was also hurting himself, because this was the most likely information they could obtain about the negotiations between Romania and the Entente. During these months, they knew nothing about the details of the negotiations between Romania and the Allies. I just know that they are negotiating, but we need to find a solution from the Russian side about what to talk about. Chapter 281 Negotiations Leaked, Part 2. After the conditions of Councillor Masnow, Andy Danton agreed, and immediately returned to the embassy. He planned to think carefully about how to obtain the conditions for negotiation point, but before Anders Danton had a good idea, Ambassador Ferrolowski came to the door. It turned out that he wanted Andy Keedendang to be responsible for simply remodeling the dormitory building to make it more like a hotel, which was also a reward for Andy Keedendang's proposal point. Then for a few days, in order to avoid the suspicion of Ambassador Ferrolowski, Andy Keedendang could only focus on the renovation of the dormitory, but fortunately, this is only the simplest modification. Remove some redundant facilities and then install a simple hotel like a hotel should have been built. Then the hotel opened, and the bank mortgaged. Fortunately, thanks to the good location of the embassy, otherwise the building would have been mortgaged for less than 500,000 lei. The embassy was able to continue operating on the advice of Anders Danton, which did not make Ambassador Ferrolowski happy, because the British and French ambassadors have not been with him for drinking tea in the past few months, which makes the Ambassador Ferrolowski, who knows the inside story, helpless, and the news from China also makes him feel anxious. The new domestic government is negotiating with the Allies. This news made Ambassador Ferrolowski completely at a loss as to what to say. In his opinion, Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and the United States with abundant supplies are enough to deal with Germany and Austria. Even if the German army is brave and good at fighting, it will resist the attack of more than the Allied powers, because the Allied powers have enough confidence to win in terms of manpower and materials. Now the peace talks are too great a loss for Russia, and it is completely worth the loss. However, these thoughts were only placed in the heart of Ambassador Ferrolowski, and were not expressed at all. It is estimated that His Excellency the Ambassador also does not know much about the domestic situation in Russia, and does not have much impression on the collapse of the Russian economy. But even so, Ambassador Ferrolowski thought more from the interests of Russia as a whole, and did not consider the idea of the new Bolshevik party. Ambassador Ferrolowski also represented the thinking of most of the Russian bourgeoisie at the time. Different from China, now Councillor Anders Danton is paying close attention to the feelings of His Excellency the Ambassador. So when Ambassador Ferrolowski was in a bad mood, Anders Danton invited him to drink. Looking at Ambassador Ferrolowski, who was drunk on the sofa, Andy Danton breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, he also drank a lot, but it was much better than the ambassador. Anders Danton glanced at Ambassador Ferrolowski and walked out of the room, because he had obtained the password of the safe, and the key had been obtained from Mr. Ambassador, who was drunk. Walk into the office of Ambassador Ferrolowski and open the corner of the bookshelf to reveal the hidden safety door. This is a specially made diplomatic safe, which is completely welded into the wall, and cannot be opened without a password or key. There are also sirens attached, which can be heard throughout the embassy, whenever violence or a wrong password is heard. Now Andy Danton is in front of the safe with a nervous look. He wants to try whether the password he got from His Excellency the Ambassador is correct. 6 Anders Danton turned the cipher pointer to the 6th, and then pressed the key inserted into the keyhole a little further down. The absence of the alarm sounded relieved him quite a bit, and it seemed that the password was probably correct. It's 9 now. After entering the 6-digit password in the same way, Andy Danton finally opened the safe. After opening the safe, he quickly flipped through the documents he needed. Not this, not this. Andy Danton looked nervously through the safe, and there were dense beads of sweat on his forehead. He rummaged through the safe and didn't find what he was looking for. Damn it, where are the things? Andy Danton was a little overwhelmed and muttered to himself. In the face of the passwords and keys that I spent a lot of energy to get, Anders Danton was very relentless. Before that, he had prepared all the future arrangements, and everything was waiting for this document to start. The absence of this Romanian negotiating document makes it impossible for Anders Danton to implement all his plans. Where the hell is this damn file? Anders Danton's expression has become neurotic. The documents he took out at the beginning were checked and thrown everywhere, and he also turned over other parts of the office, but he still found nothing. He wanted to wake up Ferrolowski with water to ask the whereabouts of the document, and at this time, the rumors that Anders Danton had heard before calmed him down. While in Russia, at a party he was chatting with a friend, and learned that a nobleman had stolen it. The items in the safe were basically taken away by the thieves. Only the noble's most important securities worth 480,000 rubles escaped the poisonous hands, and the reason for his escape was that there was a small mezzanine in the safe. The thief didn't notice here. Thinking of this, and Dizzy Danton immediately took a small metal rod and tapped the inside of the safe. When he tapped the back and left and right directions, the sound was a solid sound, and when he tapped the bottom, the sound was obviously different. Just down there. This result made Andy Keedendong excited. He carefully checked the mechanism that could not be opened. He observed that there was a screw in the crack of the safe door that was a little different, which relieved his emotions. Press the button of the mechanism disguised as a screw, and a hidden interlayer appears, with 2 thin sheets of paper inside. And Dizzy Danton picked it up and looked at it. This was the document he had been looking for, the content of the negotiations between Romania and the Entente. This is a fortune. After a brief review of the negotiation content, Andy Danton quickly became excited. Although he is only half-baked in diplomatic work, he knows the rules of diplomacy and knows that this time he has found a treasure. And Dizzy Danton calmed down after being excited, and he quickly sorted out the various documents that he had turned over in a mess. In order to buy time for himself to gain greater benefits, he organized it very carefully, intending to make the time to be discovered later. After doing all this, Andy Keedendong calmed down. He went back to his room, took the documents, and walked out of the embassy. If anyone looks for me, say I'm out. After saying a word to the embassy guard at the door, and Dizzy Danton walked out of the embassy. 20 minutes later, a call came to the counselor of the German embassy in Romania, Massenau, and he received encouraging news from the receiver. I got what you asked for, but I need $400,000 as a reward. Chapter 282. Starting with information. Of course, Councillor Massenau would not fully believe Anders Danton's words. He said into the microphone, "Your Excellency Dandong, the amount you want is too large. We must at least read the content before deciding the price." Councillor Massenau's words silenced and Dizzy Danton for a while, and it took a while before a voice came from the microphone. "I can show you part of it, but you can only come alone." Councillor Massenau immediately followed up. "So where do we meet?" "We'll meet at Demank's Cafe on Off Street." "No problem." Putting down the phone, Councillor Massenau immediately phoned Ambassador Baslub, who told him about the information that Anders Danton had already obtained from the negotiation. After hearing about Anders Danton's conditions, Ambassador Baslub said to Councillor Massenau, "We first need to make sure that the information he has in his hands is true, and then we need to determine whether to send a telegram to the country asking for financial assistance." Facing the words of Ambassador Baslub, Councillor Massenau nodded. "That's fine, let me check it out first." After speaking, the two took a map to check the meeting place. I have to say that Andy Danton chose a good position. There are many key departments in Romania on Off Street. Among them, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is in charge of Romania's internal security, is located here, and the Demank coffee shop where the two met is located in a small square, which is well connected and easy to escape. This shows that Andy Keedendong has a deep guard, afraid that they will kill the donkey. To remove the mill. Councillor Massenau went alone in accordance with Anders Danton's words. For this Russian colleague, he just wanted to say that it was too vigilant, and he could even say that, even if he got the money, the German embassy would not hurt him. But when he actually met Anders Danton himself, Councillor Massenau did not say that. Anders Danton looked left and right while wearing a disguise, and he said to Councillor Massenau, who also disguised himself and didn't want to reveal his identity, "Here's what I can show you ahead of time, and I'll burn the rest of the $400,000 if I don't." After speaking, some of the documents that were obviously torn down were handed to Councillor Massenau by Andy Keedendong. Councillor Massenau did not read the content first, but sniffed the torn piece of paper. It's British embassy paper and smells of Scottish oak. In the face of Councillor Massenau's sudden hand, Andy Keedendong did not comment but said it. "I want to answer within 3 days. I will call you every day at 8 o'clock in the morning to inquire. After 3 days, I will leave without an answer." Looking at Dizzy Danton, who pretended to be afraid, Councillor Massenau knew that if he didn't get the money, let alone 3 days, he could just let the Russian councillor in front of him wait for a month. However, he didn't have the mood to refute, because he knew that Andy Keedendong had grasped the point, and now they have no other way but to get the information from him. for the price of 400,000 US dollars. They can only report to the foreign ministry in Berlin after identifying the authenticity of the content so that they can collect the 400,000 US dollars. First point, Councillor Mass now found it to be true after researching the paper that Andres Danton gave him and Ambassador Baslab. But Andiki Danton is very smart. He will start to tear along the Romanian conditions. So Romania's conditions for the Entente show half of it on this piece of paper. This half of the content also surprised the two leaders of the German embassy. At 5 PM that day, the contents, which contained some of the Romanian conditions, arrived at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. As for the intelligence that could detect the negotiations between Romania and the Allies, Foreign Minister Simons immediately asked the embassy in Romania to buy this intelligence. And in order to avoid long nights and dreams, he also told the embassy in Romania about how to obtain funds that night. The foreign minister's telegram was sent to the embassy. After reading the two immediately divided their work. Tomorrow morning, Councillor Massino stayed in the embassy and waited for Andres Danton's call while Ambassador Baslab went to get the money. Danton got the information, and it was quick to prevent the Russian embassy from finding out that the information was leaked. So early in the morning, Ambassador Baslab was ready to go out to get money. There are so many German businessmen in Romania, and it is not too simple to find one or two temporary mobilizations with deep government backgrounds. Of course, this must also be done by Berlin. Ambassador Baslab himself will not have that much energy. Councillor Masnow, who was waiting at the embassy, really received a call from Andiki Danton at 8 o'clock, so he immediately told Andiki Danton, "We agree to your terms, but we can only trade in the afternoon. What do you think?" And Andiki Danton was silent on the phone for a while, as if considering his proposal, and it took a while before the voice came out of the microphone. "Okay, I'm calling you at 12 noon point." So Councillor Masnow has been waiting for Ambassador Baslab to come back. He has no money, but he can't beat Andiki Danton, and can't get the information. So it was not until after 10 o'clock that Ambassador Baslab returned to the embassy. The good news was that Ambassador Baslab brought back a box, which contained $400,000 worth of banknotes and valuables. Ambassador Baslab walked over to Councillor Masnow, put down the box, and said, panting, "There's just dollars in general, and some lei, and some gold and diamonds, because we're in a hurry." Facing the words of Ambassador Baslab, Councillor Masnow replied, "According to what I know about Andiki Danton, he doesn't care about this. And he is given hard currency, so what else can he be dissatisfied with?" Councillor Masnow's explanation. Ambassador Baslab believes that it is also reasonable, so the two have been waiting for the phone call from Andiki Danton. Sure enough, the phone rang at 12 o'clock, and Councillor Masnow picked it up, and there was Andiki Danton's voice. "You came to Crook's restaurant alone with the money at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We paid for it and delivered the goods. You are the only one." Councillor Masnow was of course reluctant to follow Andres Danton's baton, so he said, "As far as the two of us are too weak, we must know that a $400,000 bill is not a small amount, and it is very difficult for one person to carry it." The words of Councillor Masnow made Andiki Danton vigilant. "Only one person, or I'll set these documents on fire." Councillor Masnow knew that this was just a threat, but he didn't dare to gamble, so he had to say it. "Okay, I'll come alone. I need to tell you here, $400,000 is too difficult to exchange. We only found half of it. The rest I'll lay in precious metals for you. You don't mind?" "I don't mind, but remember to be on time." Then a beeping sound came from the microphone, and Councillor Masnow put down the phone and said to Ambassador Baslab, "It seems that your Excellency Danton is too vigilant." Then just do as he said, and ensuring that the information is available is the first priority. Hearing the words of Ambassador Baslab, Councillor Masnow nodded in agreement. For now, the priority is to obtain information, and other ideas will be discussed later. Councillor Masnow quickly rushed to Crook's restaurant with the money, and then 6 embassy guards, led by the military attaché Lieutenant Colonel Hubbards, also rushed over. They don't want to get the money back, but to ensure that Councillor Masnow gets real information and can bring it back to the embassy safely. Just before 2 o'clock, Councillor Masnow walked towards Crook's restaurant with a heavy suitcase. He's been here for almost half an hour, and now that it's almost time, He walks into this restaurant point. After walking in here, Councillor Massino was guided by the waiter into a semi-shielded isolation room, and sure enough Andy Danton was waiting for him here point. After setting aside the waiter, Councillor Massino put the box at Andy Danton's feet and sat down. Andy Danton was not polite and immediately picked up the box and opened it for inspection point. Councillor Massino watched Andy Danton's actions while drinking coffee, and he didn't speak until after the inspection. Have the numbers been checked? No problem point. So what do I want? Andy Danton took out an envelope from his pocket and handed it to him. Councillor Massino immediately turned out 2 documents and saw that one of the documents was partially torn off. He took it out from Andy Danton. The part of the paper was compared, and it was determined that it was torn from it, and then checked whether the 2 sheets were consistent, and there was no problem point. After the inspection, Councillor Massino began to roughly check the above content. After reading a brief overview, he was shocked by Romania's good appetite. The east of the Tisza River belongs to Romania. This is to make 1% of the Kingdom of Hungary territory, but also 26% of its population, is too bold point. But now is not the time for Councillor Massino to be shocked. He also discovered the problem himself. After putting the 2 documents back into the envelope and pocketing, he left, and now he urgently needs to report this amazing news to the country point. After Councillor Massino left, Andy Danton also left with the box, and now he needs to get out of here, preferably out of Romania. Chapter 283 The Final Conditions of the Allies, Part 1. It's a betrayal of Germany, and Edel doesn't take German friendship seriously. We can't just let it go point. In front of his important ministers, William II scolded Edel, who was far away in Romania point. What made William II furious was the information sent back by the embassy in Romania. On the afternoon of the day when the information was obtained, the information on the conditions negotiated between Romania and the Allies was sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Foreign Minister Wilhelm Zorf immediately reported it to Kaiser Wilhelm II. The Berlin government, which was closely watching the negotiations with the Soviet Union, immediately set its sights on Romania in the Balkans. Wilhelm II was shocked by the negotiations between Romania and the Entente, which he saw as a betrayal of the German family by the branch of the Romanian Hohenzollern family. Moreover, Germany has always been very favorable to Romania in various aids, and even in World War I did not force Romania to join. Now that Germany has finally defeated Russia and can fight to the death with Britain and France on the Western Front, the Romanians dare to negotiate to join the Allied powers. In the Kaiser's view, this is a blatant betrayal point. The important ministers present looked at the anger of the German emperor and did not mean to disturb. Now they have already figured out the character of the German emperor, and after Wilhelm II vents, His Majesty the Emperor himself will turn around. Indeed, after waiting for a while, William II calmed down. He also knew it was time to fix the problem, not just vent here. Prime Minister, what do you think we should do about this? William II looked at the important ministers in front of him, and finally ordered Prime Minister Olga Mies to answer him. Olga Mies was a professor of law at the Faculty of Law of the German Scientific Association, where he lived and worked in Tokyo, Japan from 1885 to 1889. After he returned to Germany, he became a member of the Prussian government. In 1909 he won the appointment of Deputy Secretary of State for the Prussian Treasury in Berlin. Head of the Prussian Office of Corn and Wheat Management during the First World War, he took over in July from Holberg, who had been Prime Minister for 8 years. Olga Mies did not have a good time in the government. He became the first Chancellor of Germany in a non-aristocratic background. Although he took over for only 2 months, there are various signs that the Kaiser wanted to make Georg von Hertling the Prime Minister. This Mr. Georg von Hertling is a well-known politician in Bavaria, Germany's second largest kingdom, and has recently been used by the Kaiser to unite other kingdoms within Germany. Even if he uses himself as a transition, Prime Minister Olga Mies still intends to strive for performance, he said after sorting out his thoughts. At present, we have won the victory on the Eastern Front. Romania is still negotiating with the Allied powers, but it is nothing more than wanting to gain benefits from this war. I think we can give them a part, to win them over to our camp. I think Basarabia as a reward can appease Romania. After hearing the words of Prime Minister Orgmais, Wilhelm II turned to the Chief of the General Staff, Marshal Hindenburg. What do you think we should do, Chief of Staff? Marshal Hindenburg, Chief of the General Staff with great reputation, led the German army to victory on the Eastern Front, and is now the actual controller of the German army. In August 1916, Hindenburg commanded the entire army in the name of the Kaiser. After being appointed Chief of the General Staff, his deputy Ludendorff became more and more involved in political life under his indulgence, negotiating with the government and parliament on behalf of the army, insisting on the establishment of the Kingdom of Poland in November 1916, and insisting on unrestricted submarine warfare in January 1917. Facing the Kaiser's inquiry, Hindenburg did not answer immediately, but said it instead. Your Majesty, I can only deal with Romania from a military point of view. Facing Hindenburg's words, William II still asked with great interest, then Your Excellency the Marshal, let's all listen. Hindenburg stood up and took a map and spoke to the important officials. According to the latest Romanian operational plan of the General Staff, we are preparing to assemble 300,000 troops in 23 divisions in Galicia to attack along the Suceava-Iași-Bacău line. After Hindenburg finished talking about the Germans' own goals, he started talking about allies. Austria-Hungary assembled 1 million troops from the Transylvania region, and the main forces aimed at Ploiesti, and its partial division is aimed at Răjacunești to cooperate with us to capture Bacău. The Bulgarian side 100,000 troops can be dispatched to cross the Danube from Pleven and capture the Bula-Crabia line. At the end, Hindenburg pointed to Bucharest, the capital of Romania, on the map. According to the plan of the General Staff, the Romanian army will be assembled near the capital at this time. The Austro-Hungarian and Bulgarian armies will be responsible for sticking to them, and our 300,000 strong German army will maneuver along the Focșani Buzău, and finally siege the Romanian army in its capital Bucharest. After talking about the battle plan, Hindenburg talked about the results of the battle. This way we can alleviate the instability factor on the Eastern Front, and we can get food, oil from Romania, and integrate its industry to serve us. No one knows better what Romania produces than the German government. Last year, 70% of Romania's grain, 65% of oil, and 60% of industrial products were exported to Germany. This has effectively relieved the domestic pressure in Germany, but it has also caused a large loss of German wealth. Now Hindenburg's words have made the hearts of the important ministers. William II asked a key question. So how long will it take to take Romania? Facing the Kaiser's question, Hindenburg answered truthfully, if we can follow the expected progress, then Romania should be won in half a year at this time. Foreign Minister William Zorf stepped forward and asked, what if expectations are not met? It will take a year. We have calculated that Romania can only support 1 year if it is long. In the face of Hindenburg's defense, Prime Minister Orgmais stood up and spoke. It will take a year for us to solve the Romanian problem. But if we wait another year, there will be problems in the country. Now the attitude of the domestic people towards the war is changing, especially since the quality of life has deteriorated for several years and people's dissatisfaction is accumulating. And we need note that after the establishment of Soviet Russia, the domestic left-wing political parties grew too fast, especially the extreme left-wing political parties. Speaking of which, everyone is looking at Hindenburg, which makes Hindenburg a little at a loss. Is it possible to tell others that Ludendorff is hiding the decision he made? Besides, the facts have been cast, and there is no way to change it, and Russia's withdrawal from the war also released the pressure on the Eastern Front in a short period of time. Seeing that Hindenburg was a bit unsure of the answer, Foreign Secretary Wilhelm Zorf suggested, let's talk about the conditions for Romania to join. It's too hasty to decide whether to fight against Romania. We need to at least try to win over into our camp. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284, The Final Conditions of the Allies, Part 2. The foreign secretary's words made everyone feel that there was a lot of feasibility. Because although Marshal Hindenburg, the chief of the general staff, said the final solution to the Romanian problem for the Allies themselves, this was also consuming the remaining strength brought by defeating Russia. As Hindenburg said, this contained about 500,000 military strength of the Allies. If Romania can be pulled into the camp, these forces will bring huge advantages to the Allies, whether they are used on the Western Front or Italy, and even bring France or Italy out of the war. This military force wasted in Romania is not worth it. So what conditions should we give Romania? William II is still very interested in pulling Romania into the Allies, even though he just wanted to destroy the country with troops. However, the benefits of Romania joining the Allies were too many, and William II had to think a lot about the empire. Still, Foreign Secretary William Zorf suggested it. Your Majesty, I think the Bessarabia region can be used as a reward for Romania to join the faction. As soon as the foreign minister finished speaking, Prime Minister Ülkümeş stood up and asked, "We have already mentioned this condition when we started the war, and now this condition should not be able to impress Romania. You must know that Romania's condition for the Allies is that the area east of the Tisza River belongs to it, and we are just a Bessara. It's hard to get Romania's heart moving in the Baia region." Prime Minister Ülkümeş's opinion made all the important ministers in the room nodded secretly. They had all seen the conditions that Romania offered to the Allied powers, and they were still surprised by Romania's appetite. And Foreign Minister William Zorf obviously not only prepared these conditions, but he continued to talk about it to the important ministers. "I know it's hard to impress Romania with the Bessarabia region alone. What about Odessa and Vinnytsia?" Foreign Minister William Zorf was prepared to take out a map of Ukraine and explain it to everyone. "We can win over half of the Vinnytsia and Odessa regions to win over Romania, and I believe these two regions can satisfy Romania enough." Everyone was amazed at the generosity of Foreign Minister William Zorf. These two regions plus the Bessarabia region are a territory of no less than 100,000 square kilometers. Most of these territories are fertile plains, and if you didn't know that Wilhelm Zorf was the German foreign minister, you would have thought it was a Romanian in disguise. Although he knew about the foreign secretary's proposal, Admiral Scheer couldn't help but ask, "Is this too much on the Romanian issue?" In fact, Scheer does not intend to speak because it will not use the German fleet. But in the face of the foreign minister's words, he couldn't help but speak. After hearing Scheer's questioning, William Zorf did not answer immediately, but continued to speak. "Not only that, we should also discuss with the Austro-Hungarian government and let them release the wind," intending to let the Transylvania region decide whether to stay in Austria-Hungary or not after the war. The words of Foreign Minister Wilhelm Zorf surprised all the important ministers present, and even Kaiser Wilhelm II was surprised. But soon he reacted and told William Zorf, "Are you trying to coerce the Romanian government to make a decision based on public opinion?" Seeing the emperor's reaction so quickly, William Zorf nodded. "This is a condition that the Romanians cannot refuse, and it is impossible for the Entente to give. If Romania still refuses, then we have reason to believe that Romania does not intend to negotiate with us, but only wants to join the Entente. If this is the case, then it is necessary to the plan of His Excellency the Marshal is used." Seeing the foreign minister mentioning himself, Hindenburg, who reacted, stood up and said, "Your Excellency Zorf's words are very reasonable, and we have given the most favorable conditions. If Romania still pushes, we have to react to them." To accentuate his tone, Hindenburg said to those present, "We can't leave a factor of instability behind us." Hindenburg's words made everyone present nodded in agreement. A sudden attack from behind without any precautions would hurt too much, and no one knew this. Prime Minister Ülkümeş pointed out a difficulty for the foreign secretary. "Then we need the cooperation of Austria-Hungary. Their new emperor is not a good talker. When it comes to the current new emperor Carol of Austria-Hungary, Germany can be very headache. The new emperor is constantly making small moves in the alliance." Shortly after he succeeded to the throne, he dismissed Conrad, the Austrian chief of staff, who had good relations with Germany, and sent him to the Trentino front in Italy as field commander, which made the Austrian army subordinate to the German army. There is a lot of autonomy. And on the battlefield, the order of the Eastern Front headquarters is also against yin and yang. especially in the Kerensky offensive, as the Chief of Staff of Crown Prince Leopold, Major General Maximum Hoffmann, who held the actual command of the German army on the Eastern Front, originally planned to wait for the Russian attack to be exhausted and launch a counterattack. However, the Austro-Hungarian 7th Army did not wait for the order to take the lead, and Maximum Hoffmann was greatly incensed. Unexpectedly, the Austro-Hungarian army succeeded. These are not the most painful things for the German government. This year, the new Emperor Carol of Austria-Hungary, through his brother-in-law, Prince Sixtus of Parma, held secret peace talks with France. Fortunately, because he refused to cede any territory of the Habsburg family to Italy, the secret peace talks failed. But because he supported French demands on Alsace and Lorraine, Germany was on fire. For this reason, the Kaiser has said on more than one occasion that the Austrians cannot be trusted. Now it is very difficult to get Austria-Hungary to publish the news that it is willing to let Transylvania self-determine after the war, but these are the goals that the German government needs to worry about. Now Ambassador Firilovsky is very troubled because the information about the Romanian negotiation is missing, and the counselor of the embassy, Andris Danton, has also been missing for 3 days. And he wants to die now. Damn, didn't any of you find Andris Danton? Ambassador Firilovsky vented angrily to other embassy staff. Having said this, he asked again the last guard who saw Andris Danton. Ivan, tell me again what Andris Danton said to you when he left. As for Ambassador Firilovsky, who had listened to it 8 times and still wanted to listen, the guard named Ivan continued to speak. Your Excellency, the counselor said to me, if someone looks for me, say I'm out. Facing the guard named Ivan, Ambassador Firilovsky also knew that he should not be blamed. They all blamed themselves for not being vigilant enough about Andris Danton, so he let him steal these secrets. When Ambassador Firilovsky was troubled by this, the staff he sent out to find Andris Danton also returned one after another, but the news brought back made him despair. Sorry, Your Excellency Ambassador, I didn't see Mr. Counselor. We didn't see Mr. Counselor either. The bad news made Ambassador Firilovsky know that he had to make a quick decision. He turned to a staff member. Get me a car. I'm going to the French embassy. Half an hour later at the French embassy, Ambassador Firilovsky told French Ambassador Jane Bard about the information he had lost in negotiations with Romania. This is terrible. We have to rush to the British embassy and hopefully make amends in time. So the news of the loss of classified documents from the Russian embassy also came here. Chapter 285, The Final Conditions of the Allies, Part 2. When the British and French ambassadors were overwhelmed by the loss of Russian negotiating materials, German Ambassador Baslab and Austria-Hungary Ambassador Burley went to the Romanian Prime Minister's office. Among the terms given to Romania by Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Transylvania referendum really aroused considerable dissatisfaction in Vienna. Germany used the Venice region of Italy as a reward for Austria-Hungary agreeing to make this commitment, and after the war, Berlin had to side with Vienna on whether to agree to a referendum in Transylvania to quell Austria-Hungary's mood. No. Just after the two countries negotiated, the German and Austrian ambassadors came to the Romanian Prime Minister's office to submit the conditions of the Allies. This time, Germany and Austria did not intend to directly look for King Edel, but planned to start with the government, first to arouse the national sentiment in Romania, and to put this rich condition in front of all Romanians. Germany and Austria did not believe that Romania could not agree. This is a naked conspiracy of the Allied powers, and even if the Allied powers know about it, there is no way to stop it. Don't the two ambassadors know what to do with me? After receiving requests from German and Austrian ambassadors to receive them, Prime Minister Bricianu did not know their reasons, but received them according to diplomatic protocol. Prime Minister Bricianu, these are the conditions we have prepared for Romania to join the alliance. Let's take a look. After meeting the Romanian Prime Minister Bricianu, the German ambassador, Baslab, handed him the conditions prepared for Romania. We Romania are not ready to join the camp. Are you too mistaken? Of course, Bricianu, as the Prime Minister, would not accept this document, because he knew that, if he accepted it, it meant that Romania did have the idea of joining the war. But unfortunately, the Prime Minister's superb acting skills failed to deceive the German and Austrian ambassadors, because the information on the negotiations between the Entente and Romania has been mastered by them. Ambassador Baslab said slowly, after watching Bricianu's performance. Your Excellency Prime Minister, although our conditions cannot allow you to obtain the territory east of the Tisza River, they are still very generous. Your Excellency may wish to take a look. The words of Ambassador Baslab made Prime Minister Bricianu's heart tremble, and a cold air rushed to the top of his head. Now he is full of thoughts that Dia actually knew about Romania's secret negotiations, and who leaked it out. Looking at the shocked, speechless Romanian Prime Minister, the German and Austrian ambassadors felt a lot of joy in their hearts. After Ambassador Baslab put the conditions offered by the Allies on the table, he gave Prime Minister Bricianu a meaningful look, because they knew that it was this Prime Minister who was secretly negotiating with the Allies. It was not until Ambassador d'Austria walked out that Prime Minister Bricianu reacted, and his performance all fell into the eyes of the Allies. But he can't care about the diplomatic faux pas, and now he needs to quickly find the king to discuss the harm to Romania. That's how it is, Your Majesty. Inside the palace, Prime Minister Bricianu told Edel what had happened. Hearing that the Allies had discovered that Romania was negotiating with the Entente, and even knew of Romania's demands, Edel was also bruised. At present, he has no good way to fool the past. The main reason is that Germany and Austria have already solved Russia on the Eastern Front, and now it is not too easy to free out their hands to settle Romania. Because Germany and Austria have more than 3 million troops on the Eastern Front, even if they leave 100 to watch over Soviet Russia, there are more than 2 million that can be used in other directions. If so many troops are pressed against Romania, Edel can only go abroad to continue the war of resistance. Your Majesty, in this situation we can only agree to the conditions of the Allies. After seeing that Edel did not speak, Bricianu, the Prime Minister, tentatively proposed. As an Anglo-French leader, it was because he couldn't see the direction that he could say such a thing. Prime Minister Bricianu does favor Britain and France because he thinks that will help Romania. At present, according to the attitude of the German and Austrian ambassadors, it is impossible to delay, and they will not rest assured that a half-hearted country will be left behind. So this is estimated to be the last condition of Germany and Austria. If he refuses, it is estimated that the next time Ambassador Dia will bring a declaration of war in order to give weight to his rhetoric, the Prime Minister said to Edel, looking at Dia's conditions. Your Majesty, the conditions given by Dia this time are actually very good. Seeing that Edel did not speak, the Prime Minister read out the terms of Dia. At the time of joining the Allies, transfer the Transilvania region to Romania. If Romania provides 400,000 troops, 2 million tons of grain, and 1.5 million tons of refined oil for the war, it will give its Odessa region as compensation. And if Romania provides another 400,000 troops, 2.5 million tons of grain, and 2 million tons of refined oil for the war, the Vinica region, except for the northeast, will also be given to Romania as compensation. In addition, after the war, it will be discussed with Austria-Hungary whether the Transnian regional referendum should remain in its country or join Romania. Hearing the conditions stated by Prime Minister Bricianu, Edel smiled bitterly. It seems that the allied countries have also taken great pains to win over Romania, and they are coercing public opinion to force Romania to join the allied countries. It is estimated that the conditions given by the allied countries will be widely circulated tomorrow. This time Romania has been suppressed, and turbulent national sentiment will be high again. In a hurry, Edel asked Prime Minister Bricianu, Prime Minister, if the terms are made public, how many people in the government would support the terms to join the Allies? Facing Edel's question, Bricianu knew its intention, and he answered truthfully. It is estimated that half of the people will agree to join the Allied camp. Edel breathed a sigh of relief when the Prime Minister continued. 60% of the remaining half are expected to be neutral. This is the condition of the Allied countries. If it is too bad, it is estimated that these neutral people in the government will support the allied countries. The Prime Minister's words made Edel also feel helpless. Romania and Germany are too closely linked economically, especially in the past few years. They have completely relied on orders from allied countries to live. If you don't know the direction of history yourself, then it is very possible to join the allied countries to fight. However, the government's movements are small matters, and now the most important thing is the army. Edel was planning to ask the guards to call the top of the army to find out, and this was a news. Your Majesty, the British and French ambassadors ask to see you. Chapter 286 Romania 039 S response 1. Edel's heart moved, and after glancing at the Prime Minister, he instructed the guards. Let them come over. In the face of Edel's actions, Prime Minister Bricianu also had an idea, and he asked carefully, after seeing the guards leave, Your Majesty wants to. Edel reached out and stopped the Prime Minister from continuing to say what he said. It's just an idea at the moment, and we need to see how much the allied countries value us. I have seen Your Majesty and Your Excellency the Prime Minister. The two British and French ambassadors walked quickly into Edel's office. After a brief courtesy to the two, the French ambassador let Bud speak first. Your Majesty, we heard that Dia has made new conditions for your country. In the face of the French ambassador's question, Prime Minister Bricianu took the remarks. Your Excellency, the German and Austrian ambassadors did put forward new conditions today. What surprised us was that the German and Austrian ambassadors were very clear about our secret conversation, which made our country feel very passive. After Prime Minister Bricianu finished speaking, he stared at the British and French ambassadors, obviously waiting for an explanation from the two. Because the Prime Minister has asked his cousin, there has been no leakage incident on his side, and no important items have been lost, and he has not lost any important items. Then the problem can only be on the side of the allied powers, and now he plans to do it with the other party. The French ambassador made Bud and the British ambassador Richardman look at each other, knowing that this matter could not be concealed, but he did not expect to be found by Romania so quickly. They also planned to tell the story at the appropriate time, and now they can only tell the truth. So the French ambassador asked Bud to tell the Russian embassy counselor Anders Danton that the Russian embassy had stolen the negotiation documents. Came out. Eder and Prime Minister Bricianu did not expect such a result. A second person in the embassy stole the negotiation materials, making Romania into a passive position. Then do you have any salvage measures? Good. Edel, who didn't know what to say at all, could only ask the British and French ambassadors what the countermeasures were. In the face of the king's inquiry, British ambassador Richardman stepped forward to explain. Your Majesty, we only found out that the Russian embassy had leaked. We have reported it to the government and we believe there will be an answer soon. To ambassadors, how fast is it soon? Do you know that Dio has given the final conditions? The words of the British and French ambassadors made Prime Minister Bricianu very dissatisfied. He seemed that Britain and France did not pay enough attention to Romania. This made His Excellency the Prime Minister very dissatisfied, so he vented it in front of the two ambassadors. The two ambassadors could only bear the venting of Prime Minister Bricianu, who made it a mistake on their side. In the end, it was Edel who eased the embarrassment of the two. He told the Prime Minister, Okay Prime Minister, now we need to deal with the conditions given by Dia. Your Majesty, I'm sorry. I lost my temper for Edel's persuasion. Prime Minister Bricianu calmed down. At this time, the French ambassador asked Bud to ask. I don't know what the conditions given by Germany and Austria are. Can you easily tell us? Looking at the inquiring eyes of the British and French ambassadors, Edel took out the conditions given by Dia and told them. Just watch it if you want. Anyway, you'll know in 2 days. After that, Edel left here. He must now understand the movement of the army. This is the strength of Romania, to keep the results in the future. As for the British and French ambassadors who stayed here, the Prime Minister would have a good time talking with them, and it was just the right time for them to see Romania's attitude. After watching Edel leave, Prime Minister Bricianu pointed to the documents on the table and spoke to the two ambassadors. The conditions are here. Let's see. The British and French ambassadors quickly picked up the documents on the table and checked them. In fact, the two ambassadors were psychologically prepared for the conditions given by Dia. But they still obviously underestimated the conditions given by Dia. The two ambassadors were a little surprised to see that the allies were willing to hand over the regions of Bessarabia, Edessa, and Vinica to Romania. This is a territory of about 100,000 square kilometers, and it is basically a plain terrain. The people in these places are relatively wealthy, and after the war, they agreed to hold a referendum in Tanzania. or thought came to the minds of the two of them. The allies must report to the country immediately. Seeing that the two ambassadors looked at the conditions of the allies with uneasy expressions, Prime Minister Bricianu said to the two, "Now the conditions of the allied countries are clear to both of you. To be honest, I'm at a loss as to how to choose, but these conditions will drive people crazy. I hope the two ambassadors will give you an answer as soon as possible." Regarding the Prime Minister's words, the two who have served as ambassadors in Romania for many years are very clear that this is to say that the domestic people have no resistance to the conditions of the allied countries. If the will of the people is so great that the government must comply, it is too late. Therefore, without the urging of the Prime Minister, the two will also step up to report the matter to the country. After getting what they wanted, the two ambassadors said their goodbyes to Prime Minister Bricianu. "Thank you very much for your interest in us. We will expeditiously report today's matter to the country. Please rest assured that you will not wait too long. I believe that the importance of the country to Romania is clearer than we are." Facing the words of the two ambassadors, Prime Minister Bricianu said it naturally. "Then I hope it will be as soon as possible. I also want to cooperate with you, but I can't delay this matter for too long. Yes, please rest assured. The British and French ambassadors returned to the embassies and immediately sent a telegram to the country, sending the conditions of the allied countries to the country, and described in detail the indecision of the Romanian government on this matter, and the two ambassadors agreed that if the country does not issue new conditions, then Romania's joining the allied camp will become inevitable. When the British and French ambassadors were worried about this, Edel also convened the three giants of the Romanian military to discuss in a secret room with only 4 people. Edel was the first to ask, "Admiral Ploiesti, as the chief of staff, do you have a plan if you want to fight against the allies?" Facing the king who gave himself such a big proposition as soon as he came, Ploiesti was also a bit wrong, but fortunately, the general staff has done this kind of plan many times, and Ploiesti is also familiar with it. He opened his mouth and said, "Your Majesty, the general staff has already made several plans for this. I don't know whether it needs an offensive or a defensive plan." Facing Ploiesti's confident words, Edel suddenly became interested and listened to it. Chapter 287 Romania 039 S Response Part 2. Then talk about it. Facing the king's words, Ploiesti walked to the large Romanian map and began to explain. "Your Majesty, let's talk about the offensive plan first. Here we first need to mobilize 400,000 militiamen to form a new force. It is estimated that the initial reorganization can be completed within a week. The second mobilization of the reserve should also be accelerated. Within days, the second batch of reservists must also enter the barracks. In addition, the third batch of mobilization must also be mobilized within 3 months, because this batch of mobilization military training is insufficient, so it will be adequate in the barracks after training. They will be integrated into the army in the form of supplementary troops." At the end of the speech, the chief of the general staff, Prezhan, said to Edel with a smile, "These are basically what Admiral Courtois is doing. I'm just in charge of explaining it." General Courtois, as the minister of the army, said humbly, "Where many of them are still helped by the general staff, and Lieutenant General Ferrit has given a lot of power." Hearing Admiral Courtois mentioning himself, Lieutenant General Ferrit, the director of education, also nodded to the king. In the past few years, Lieutenant General Ferrit has been doing well as the director of education, but he is very low-key in the army, and he is usually not seen to make any comments at all, except for his own work. Many people say that he has more and more high-level bearing. After Ploiesti finished talking about the mobilization mechanism, he began to talk about the troop assignment. "Your Majesty, in our latest battle plan, we need to concentrate our forces to take Transylvania first." For Ploiesti's words, the military executives who were sitting, including Edel, agreed. As long as Austria-Hungary is involved in countless games in the past, the number one goal is to win Transylvania. Because as long as you open the map, you can find that Romania is like a U-shaped letter, and Transylvania is in the middle of the U-shaped letter. The Austro-Hungarian army occupying Transylvania can condescend to threaten most of Romania, so once it starts a war with the Allies and wins Transylvania, it becomes the primary target. Otherwise, as long as the Austro-Hungarian army is holding back in Transylvania, Romania needs to be defended everywhere, and this is unreasonable according to Romania's strength point. The terrain of Transylvania is also formed by 3 mountain ranges: Carpathian Mountains, Southern Carpathian Mountains and Apennine Mountains. The highest of these are of course the Carpathian Mountains and the Southern Carpathian Mountains at the junction of Ru, and the Apennine Mountains, which now border the rest of Hungary, have become the focus of the military. Because to defend against the huge army of Austria-Hungary, it can only rely on the Apennine Mountains for defense, which saves valuable troops for other places. Prezhan explained to Edel the plan of the General Staff. Your Majesty, our attack on Transylvania is planned to be carried out from 3 aspects. The first is the North Road Army. We plan to assemble 9 divisions and use Baku as the assembly base. Break through the north such as Kraken and Pros. Your Majesty, the goal is to take Rijak and then Odessk Point. After talking about the plan for the North Road, Admiral Pilishin talked about the south. Next is Army Group South. We plan to assemble 15 divisions in Volga and Targusiu. However, Army Group South's targets are Sibiu and Deva respectively. After winning Deva, South the army, depending on the situation, needed to keep 3 to 5 divisions to defend against the Austro-Hungarian forces coming from Fort Temesh and Adrab. Then the rest of the army south gathered and took Alba-Iulia Point. After spending a great deal of language on Army Group South, Prezhan continued. Finally, there is the Central Army in the middle. We plan to assemble the forces of 11 divisions, with Buzor and Ploiesti as the rendezvous. The Central Army has a heavier task and needs to take Brasov as soon as possible to reinforce the North and South Army groups. If all our goals can be successfully accomplished, then the Central Army will be split to supplement the North and South Army point. The strengthened North Army will take Targumiers, while the South Army will need to take Turda, and finally will jointly take the core city of Cluj in Transylvania. We then left 25 to 27 divisions to defend using the Apennine Mountains, leaving 8 to 10 divisions available for use in other directions. Edel has seen such a plan more than once, and each time it is necessary to assemble most of Romania's standing divisions and new divisions with high combat power. In Romania, the intensive training of the militia over the past few years has been very effective. Now there is not much to say about the basic infantry and the militia. Even the artillery, communication, and chemical defense troops have been trained well. If it is formed, the gap between the standing divisions will not be too big. The only problem is that the cost is high. Sure enough, after the Transylvania offensive, Admiral Puri went on to talk about other directions. In Moldavia, we have 16 divisions prepared to defend the enemy from Galicia. Among them, in Suceava, where we are most likely to encounter, we have prepared 4 divisions, and because it is a plain area, our General Staff specially allocated a 210 heavy artillery regiment and a 150 heavy artillery regiment to them. In Iasi, we also prepared 4 divisions, and also had a 210 heavy artillery regiment. In Galati, we also 3 divisions are prepared for defense, among which our largest 240 heavy artillery regiment is also deployed here. In addition, 2 divisions and 3 divisions are deployed in Fochnesa and Roman respectively for mobile support. They have increased firepower with a 150 heavy artillery regiment. Is it appropriate to place most of the heavy artillery regiment here? Edel asked curiously when the voice fell on Mount Pili. You must know that these heavy artillery regiments of the Romanian army cost a lot, and it is not too wasteful to use them for the defense of Moldavia. In the face of Edel's inquiry, Admiral Prishin explained, Your Majesty, we don't think it's a waste at all. We are likely to encounter German troops on the eastern front in Moldavia. If there is no heavy artillery in the plains, I'm afraid that the army mainly on the second line will be unable to withstand the pressure and retreat. Admiral Prezhan's words made Edel also silent, and he was very clear about what the German army represented in this era. Now it is obvious that the capture of Transylvania is the most important, and can only be defended by these second-line troops. Thinking of this, Edel feels heavy in his heart. Priest will continue to talk about the Bulgarian direction. Your Majesty, now Bulgaria is the most critical battle in which we use the fewest troops. Edel put down his sigh about the soldiers who were about to shed blood for the country, and cheered up. Keep talking. We are also planning to attack in the Bulgarian direction. However, the soldiers that make up the Bulgarian army have only 8 divisions, but they are all elite units of our Romanian army. The 1st and 2nd divisions of the Guard will be used in this direction. They will use Rus and Suman other rendezvous areas, with Provan and Veliko Tarnovo as the primary targets. After occupying here, they will directly target Sofia, the capital of Bulgaria. However, this requires the allied forces gathered in Paralia, Greece, to contain the main force of the Bulgarian army in Thessaloniki. After Admiral Priest finished his explanation, Edel clapped his hands twice as approval for the plan. He said to the big three present, "This plan is good, and I will seriously consider it. You can make preparations according to this plan. Now we still need to look at the attitudes of Britain and France towards Romania. In this case, Edel can no longer sit still, so can the British and French governments still be able to sit still?" Chapter 288. In fact, Britain and France are already jumping feet now, and their emphasis on Romania is more than Edel's estimation. The main reason was that the Soviet Union and the Allies signed an armistice treaty, which made Britain and France, who had been fighting very hard on the Western Front, extremely fearful. The thought of freeing millions of German and Austrian troops from the Eastern Front gave Paris and London a headache. Now Britain and France are also negotiating overnight on the news from their embassies in Romania. In Paris, French Prime Minister Clemenceau is calling his cabinet to discuss the matter in this war. Because the battlefield was in France, it suffered huge losses. According to later data, France's fiscal deficit reached more than 18 billion francs after World War I. In addition, France also owed 16 billion francs to the United States and 13 billion francs to the United Kingdom. In addition to these arrears, more important is the population loss. The war killed more than 1.4 million French people and injured more than 3 million French people, which accounted for 10% of the French population. Although the end of the war was not yet reached, the French casualties had now reached 3.5 million. According to Pétain, who succeeded Nivelle as the French commander-in-chief at the beginning of the year, the French army is now in a state of pessimism about the war. This year, desertion and war weariness have spread in the army. No matter how the officers publicize, the soldiers' emotions are not high enough. Some officers are also infected by the soldiers' emotions and resist military orders. The bad news in the French army made Prime Minister Clemenceau even more interested in Romania's participation in the war. As the Prime Minister of France, Clemenceau is known as the Tiger of France. As the leader of the French radicals, he can have a lot of influence in French politics. Lost at the French front this year, with heavy casualties and low morale, Russia withdrew from the war. The faction represented by former Prime Minister Ko and the French government advocates immediate peace negotiations and the realization of peace without victors in this emergency. President Raymond Poincaré, who was in the main battle, decided to ask Clemenceau to form a cabinet. It is Clemenceau's second term as Prime Minister this year, succeeding former Prime Minister Ko in his first term as Prime Minister in 1906, and he was also Minister of the Interior. He set up the Ministry of Labor in the cabinet, which was the first time in French history. Several social reform measures were included in his policy agenda, such as the 8-hour workday and the introduction of a progressive income tax. Therefore, as a representative of the hardline faction, Clemenceau now needs to quickly stabilize the confidence of the French people and the army. In the country he maintained his autocratic character and implemented a personal dictatorship while retaining the parliament. He killed decisively and commanded with dignity. He went to the front many times to revive morale and violently suppressed the anti-war forces at home and dismissed them as defeatists. He also used this as an excuse to vigorously suppress the labor movement. Of course, this is not enough. In order to inspire people's hearts and morale, we also need to see the hope of winning. Therefore, the US military on the other side of the Atlantic has become the savior in his mouth. However, given that the US military is still being formed and trained in its own country, it has not come to Europe. Then Romania is a complementary measure. In addition, the Romanian army, unlike the American army, has not received the baptism of modern warfare, and its performance in the Balkan War is also seen in the eyes. So for Romania to join the allied group, Clemenceau means that it will win. The current Russian embassy leak has put Romania in a difficult situation and made Clemenceau nervous. He was afraid that Romania could not bear the pressure and fell to the Allies. This means that Germany can mobilize up to 1 million troops to strengthen the Western Front, which will make France's situation even more difficult, or it will be the German army to seize Paris, which will be a huge disaster for France. Then the peace talks will no longer becomes impossible point. So Clemenceau wanted to prevent this from happening. In the government meeting room, he spoke to the cabinet members present the theme of the meeting. Right now Romania is facing a German-Austrian threat. Because of the leak of the Russian embassy point, we need to figure out a way to keep them from giving in to their demands. What do you guys think about that? Clemenceau's voice fell, and the cabinet members present all turned to Foreign Minister Ploiesti. Ploiesti, who is only 60 years old, knows that this is what everyone is waiting for him to say, and this matter needs the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to take the lead. However, Picturing, who belongs to the same radical faction as Clemenceau, was also a minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs not long ago, but now he has to come up with a way for everyone to discuss, but fortunately he has already prepared before. Our foreign ministry's view on this matter is that Romania must win over, but how to win over requires skills. As Pichin spoke, he had maps of the Balkans and Eastern Europe hung up. He pointed to Romania and made a speech. As you can see, Romania's position is quite critical, and it is completely surrounded by allied countries. It can be said that we have to pay a high price for Romania to join us. Fortunately, Romania is very interested in joining us, and it is also quite good to look at their appetite. Everyone present knew what Pichin said, and of course they also knew about Romanian appetite. Ploiesti continued to talk nonsense. Despite Romania's appetite, we at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs believe that this time is reasonable. Romania is in a position that can help us hold back millions of enemy troops before they reinforce the Western Front and threaten us. And as long as we pay attention, it can be seen that the position of Romania is also very important for us in the future. It is not far from the Red regime of Soviet Russia to the east of them. We must consider the possibility of intervening in the failure of this Red Devil regime. Then Romania can become a barrier to its spread. Reliable guarantee. None of the people who were present in the Red Soviet Russia would like it, let alone Prime Minister Clemenceau, who could lead the formation of the Russian intervention army, but the war was holding them back. So how do we make Romania and Soviet Russia hostile to each other? A cabinet official inquired about Pichin's plans. This is very simple. Pichin gestured in Ukraine. We can give Romania to Ukraine, and I think what the allies can give, we can still give, and we should give them more in Ukraine. For example, we can give them some English. Pichin's remarks caused other members of the cabinet to discuss, among which the Minister of Quarters Lucial put forward a different view. I have a somewhat different opinion on the views of Foreign Minister Pichin. Under such conditions, Romania will gain a lot of territory after the war. How can we balance them in the future? Lucial's words are also representative of many opposing opinions in Britain and France. For Romania's conditions and ideas, they can know 3 points without thinking about it. Before, they had too much appetite for Romania, which made Russia firmly opposed. Now Russia has withdrawn from the war, but no one objected to it without a watch. Anyone with a discerning eye knows that after the defeat of Germany and Austria, the sphere of influence in Central Europe and the Balkans will enter a vacuum, and Romania will likely become a hindrance to France's entry into the region, and there are many people in London who are worried. Therefore, Lucial's words also represent the views of many British and French officials. Chapter 289, The response of Britain and France. In fact, Lucial's suggestion and Pichin's proposal are both for the future of the country, but Lucial is for the interests of France after the war. Because Lucial believed that the Allies had no hope of winning after the United States entered the war, so he had to plan ahead for the situation after the war, and Pichin is for the interests of France now. He believes that France's losses are too great now, and it is a bit of putting the cart before the horse to consider the post-war period. It is necessary to reduce France's losses before taking into account the post-war period. The most important thing now is to let other countries share France's losses, so the two views will appear to be different. However, this needs to see which situation is more critical for Britain and France at present. The two men's proposals were also debated at the meeting, with both sides' views being for national considerations, which also caused debate among cabinet members who supported their respective views. Prime Minister Clemenceau, who presided over the meeting, looked at his cabinet members with a headache, but fortunately, he was still in control of the scene. However, careful attention also found that the members of the cabinet who supported Foreign Minister Pai Zhang had the upper hand, which also had a lot to do with the loss of France. Alright. Clemenceau, 76, knocked on the table to get everyone to notice him, and he was ready to end the debate. Members of the cabinet, I know your love for France, but pulling Romania into our camp is the primary factor now, so we need to talk about this topic. And we don't have much time, don't know when Romania will succumb to Allied pressure, so we can't waste our energy and time on other things. Let's get to the point now. After Clemenceau finished speaking, all the cabinet members knew his point of view, and it seemed that His Excellency the Prime Minister agreed with the suggestion of Foreign Minister Pichon. Now that the Prime Minister has made his own decision, cabinet members who have other ideas can only accept the Prime Minister's preparations. Clemenceau saw that the cabinet members had no voice against him, so he spoke to the Minister of Foreign Affairs Pichon. With regard to the conditions on Romania, our attitude is that we have to pull it into the camp to relieve our pressure. This has to be felt by our allies. Pichon nodded to Clemenceau. I will put forward our views to Balfour on this point, and I believe that the British side will seriously consider our views. Pichon's words made Clemenceau feel the same, and young people in his family were also called up to the army. Yeah, the French lads are on the battlefield. We need to get them back a little more from this hell. Pedestrians in London in winter are also much rarer, which is due to the influence of the 3-year war. The people, who were passionate and full of fanaticism before the war began, have calmed down in the letters of death. Most young adults in London now join the military or work in military-related industries, which has led to a serious underutilization of other factories in the UK. Fortunately, British shipping has remained smooth. Although the infinite submarine warfare has caused great losses to merchant ships, it has been slowed down according to the strong shipbuilding capabilities of the Allied countries. The only downside is that ordinary people have a harder time in war, especially in winter, when they need enough necessities like clothing and food. However, this is only a problem among ordinary people. It is not a problem for the wealthy, especially Prime Minister David George, who is in charge of the British Empire. Now he is negotiating the terms of Romania's membership with cabinet members. Guys, I think Romania's requirements need to be lowered a little more. The speaker is Balfour, the foreign secretary, who was prime minister from 1902 to 1905, and who was 70 years old because of the early death of his lover in his youth. He was expressing his views in a powerful way. In later generations he would be better known for proposing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. It's just that this point of view has not been raised yet. But he is already brewing. Balfour's views were dissenting in the cabinet, and Lord Milner, who was in charge of the army, immediately opposed it. But by doing this, is there a guarantee that Romania will join us? If it joins the alliance, it will be difficult for the boys in France. I can't let these soldiers who serve the British Empire be wasted like this. As the governor of South Africa after the Boer War, Lord Milner took over as Minister of War shortly after World War I. Of course, he was responsible for the British soldiers who were killed in France and Germany, so he immediately raised his objections facing the opposition of the War Minister. Balfour gave his explanation. Of course I know that Romania's participation will reduce the pressure on our front, but it will also require Romania to come up with a reasonable solution. Balfour took out a map of the Balkans, pointed to the location of Romania on it and the claimed territory, and said to the other members, look, the territory that Romania is asking for has exceeded its existing territory. This is completely a lion's opening. Moreover, Romania does not compromise on these conditions and has no intention of reducing it at all. Many cabinet members looked at Balfour's map of the Balkans, and it was true that Romania's claim was larger than the existing one, and they began to talk one after another. They did not suppress Germany to give other countries a chance to grow and develop. Even if it was given, it needed to be given by the British Empire and could not be demanded by itself. This is the confidence of being the #1 power in the world. Obviously, Romania is a bit too open and presumptuous, which makes the British face a little uncomfortable, which is also what Edel, who made this plan, did not take into account because it comes from the 21st century, when the British Empire was more of a joke. Edel took Britain a lot when formulating this plan. So let these old rivers and lakes who are in the political arena see through Romania's purpose at a glance. France has to agree to this plan because of their huge loss, but the United Kingdom is not so easy to accept. While the cabinet members were discussing, a voice sounded. I think Romania is asking for too little. We should give them something more. The sound of this voice immediately quieted the cabinet members who were discussing, and a slightly fat person stood up and looked at the other cabinet members, repeating it again. I repeat. I think we are giving too little and need to give Romania more territory. The words of this chubby cabinet member caused an uproar at the scene, and this person became the focus of attention for a while, and Prime Minister George, who presided over the meeting, couldn't help but teach a lesson. Churchill, do you know what you're talking about? Chapter 290 CHURCHILL and -039, S-Plan. 1. In the face of the Prime Minister's question, Churchill answered seriously. Yes, Your Excellency, I know what I'm doing. Winston Churchill certainly knew what he was talking about. As a cabinet minister at the age of 34, and the most important and key position in the British Empire as a naval minister at the age of 37, it can be seen that his official fortune is prosperous, but it all made sense when he came from the Churchill family. His father, Randolph Churchill, had a reputation for being unhappy in politics, but that was relative. Served as Minister of Indian Affairs, and became Chancellor of the Exchequer at the age of 37, but this made Randolph Churchill, who was intent on becoming Prime Minister, depressed and eventually died at the age of 46. Take a look at the experience that upset Churchill's father, which speaks volumes about the Churchill family's place in the UK. This was also a major factor in Winston Churchill's ability to stay in the cabinet after his fiasco at the Battle of the Dardanelles. But as Foreign Secretary Balfour, who has already served as Prime Minister and is almost 70 years old, the old man is not suppressed by the prestige of the Churchill family. Even if he is only the nephew of the Marquis, he slowly wiped his reading glasses and preached, "Mr. Churchill, please note that this is a meeting to determine the policy of the empire, not your quarters office. Please state your reasons as you see fit." In the face of Balfour's questioning, Churchill would not be polite when he was the Secretary of the Navy. You must know that Marshal Fisher, who created the era of dreadnoughts, resigned because of his run on the direction of the attack at One Stop. However, Churchill did not end well, because the defeat in the Battle of the Dardanelles was pushed out of the decision-making circle. But fortunately, with the family's connections, he quickly revived and served as the Minister of Military Supplies during his tenure as Quartermaster Secretary. He promoted a number of new inventions with far-reaching consequences, including tanks, aircraft and chemical gas. Under Churchill's proposal, the British rapidly expanded the production scale of tanks and promoted the application of aircraft in warfare. If he hadn't performed well in the position of Minister of Quarters, his speech at this meeting would not have received so much attention. Seeing everyone looking at him, Churchill gave his reasons. "Everyone, how much do you know about Romania?" Seeing that everyone looked at him blankly, Churchill took out a pile of Romanian materials from his briefcase and distributed them to everyone. "This is the information I have found about Romania over the years from the government, and some of them are compiled by myself. Let's take a look." Everyone picked up the materials prepared by Churchill and looked at it. From this information, we can see the intention of Churchill. He analyzed Romania's industry, population, resource geography, diplomatic transformation and other aspects, and made comments on several major high-level officials in Romania. Among them, the Chief of the General Staff, Pretian, was evaluated by Churchill as a rare military genius because he completely changed the Romanian army, which can be seen from the Balkan Wars. Moreover, in the field of new military technology, Ploiesti is also taking precautions to develop new weapons, so that the Romanian army does not lag behind any powers in equipment. And Romanian Prime Minister Brătianu, he was also evaluated as an excellent internal affairs genius. During his tenure as Prime Minister, Romania's economy has been developing rapidly. And Romania's King Edel, of course, was also evaluated by him. In evaluating Edel, Churchill praised his performance in Romania with his shrewd mind, excellent vision, and genius-like vision. Whether it was Romania's rapid approach to Germany and Austria in the early days, or the transition to neutrality before the outbreak of World War I, the situation has gradually become clear, and an excellent time has been chosen for London and Paris to rely on him to meet his requirements. It's all a manifestation of his abilities. Churchill's information gave everyone a deeper understanding of Romania. Among them, Chancellor of the Exchequer Andrew Law couldn't help but talk about it after reading it. I didn't expect little Romania to have £60 million in income, which is really unexpected. The Chancellor of the Exchequer made the other cabinet members present also very emotional. Before the war, the British Empire was the world's #1 power, only close to £300 million. I did not expect that a small Balkan country can reach 1/5 of its own. Although it is unfair to compare the pre-war with the present, it also made the cabinet ministers present sigh, mainly because Romania's income was only £20 million before the war. Churchill saw that everyone was watching almost, so he spoke. It is also through these materials that the opportunity for Romania to expand its territory is obtained. Churchill pointed to a map that the Foreign Secretary had put up for them and told them, "Look, everyone, this is Romania." He clicked on the Romanian location, then pointed to the Hungarian part east of the Tisza. "This is the territory that Romania is asking for. I don't think now is the time to be entangled in these Hungarian territories." He made a stroke in Ukraine and said all the east of the South Bug River. "We can also give him Ukrainian territory. If that is not enough, we can also give them all the east of the Dnieper." Those present were senior politicians who immediately understood Churchill's intentions. "You want to keep Russia and Romania alive in the future." Hearing someone say what he meant, Churchill nodded in acknowledgement. "Yes, I think that we are now personally hijacking a country with potential, which will consume our precious national strength, which is not worth it. Then finding an opponent for him is what we need to prepare for." It was clear that Russia was the opponent Churchill was looking for Romania. Churchill paused here for the rest of the cabinet to digest what he had said before continuing to express his thoughts on making such a decision. "We have been fighting this battle for 3 years, and we currently have an absolute advantage. I believe that it will not be long before they will not be able to fight, so we need to prepare in advance. If DAO surrenders, we will gain the most. The French allies, they are going to be one family on the continent, which is a very bad thing." None of those present expressed surprise to hear that Churchill was worried about his French ally. Don't look at the fact that Britain and France are fighting in a trench now, but there are many times when the two do not face each other. On other occasions Churchill was not alone in worrying about France's dominance in post-war continental Europe. They believed in the words of Prime Minister Palmerston, "There are no permanent friends, only permanent interests." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291 CHURCHILL S-Plan, Part 2. Think about it, gentlemen. Germany is weakened by defeat, Austria-Hungary is divided, and Russia is occupied by the Red Devils. France will find itself at the end of the war with the best era since Napoleon. The ministers listened to Churchill's generous speech, and no one wondered why Italy was not mentioned. As a major power, Italy can lose even a small African country, which is simply a shame. I thought it would be brave, but it can be seen from its performance in this war. In the face of a small number of local troops in Austria-Hungary, Italy can still be defeated, and there is no one in this war. But why did we have to choose Romania? Seeing a cabinet member questioning himself, Churchill said naturally, "This is a combination of factors I consider, from location, economics, and politics." Churchill's words made everyone look at him. Seeing the interest of the cabinet members, he decided to explain. "I believe everyone knows the geographic location, so I won't say more. The documents I gave you about politics and military have already explained enough. Now I will talk about what I value the most." Churchill said what he valued most. that is the king of Romania. Here I need to say that this young king has a very high prestige and power in Romania. How high can it be? Asked by a cabinet minister who didn't know much about Romania, Queen Victoria's power and prestige were already high. For the British Empire, the Victorian period was the most memorable era. During this period, the British Empire overwhelmed the great powers, as the British economist Jevons described in 1865. The plains of North America and Russia are our cornfields. Canada and the Baltic Sea are our wooded regions. Australia has our sheep pastures. Peru sends silver. South Africa and Australia's gold flows to London. Indians and Chinese grow tea for us, and we have coffee. Sugarcane and spice plantations all over the East Indies. Our cotton has long been cultivated in the southern United States and has now spread to every warm part of the planet. Imagine how spectacular this is. The whole world is serving Britain. Unfortunately, when the Second Industrial Revolution arrived, the British Empire allowed to late developing countries to take the lead. Economically, the United States and Germany have surpassed the empire. The economic base is reflected in the military, the two countries peeping at sea power, which was vital to the British Empire, the Kaiser's high seas fleet, and the United States also quietly built the Great White Fleet. In the face of the actions of the two rising stars, the British Empire quietly adopted superb political tactics, suppressing one and winning over the other. For the United States across the Atlantic Ocean, the empire pulled on board the greedy Wall Street capitalists. By giving up a small portion of their interests, they strongly encouraged the United States to join the Entente for their own interests as for being closed to itself. Of course, Germany, which is located in Central Europe, can only suppress it. The empire wooed the two land powers, allowing Germany to retain only part of its energy at sea. The British Empire was able to devote most of its energies to the navy, to ensure absolute overwhelming power over Germany at sea to protect its colonies across the globe. Now it seems that the process is a bit tortuous, but everything is moving forward according to the established development track. According to my investigation and the report of the ambassador to Romania, the Romanian monarch is a bit like an Eastern monarch. After Churchill finished speaking, he added involuntarily, "It's kind of like the power of a Far Eastern monarch." In the face of Churchill's remarks, the cabinet ministers present smiled. It was rare to see Churchill have such an expression, but they all knew the reason. Churchill was madly infatuated with religion and Oriental culture when he was young, and his family had to write letters to discourage him from becoming a ****. In 1907, for example, Gwendoline Bertie, soon to be Churchill's sister-in-law, pleaded in a letter, "Please don't convert to ****. I noticed your Oriental Pasha-like tendencies." If Churchill had believed in Christianity at the time, then he would not have been able to hold a high position in politics. Can there still be a backward power structure like the Far East in Europe? A cabinet minister who obviously did not believe in asked Churchill. In his opinion, the power structure of the monarchy in the Far East is backward, and it is not enterprising. It is unbelievable that such a power structure still exists in the civilized continent of Europe, but fortunately he does not yet have the universal spirit of the later United States. In the face of inquiries, Churchill spoke frankly. "Yes, I didn't think of this kind of political structure in Europe before. The Romanian monarch has more power than Germany and Russia, but it's not a bad thing for us." Churchill's words. Let Prime Minister David George speak. Indeed, excessive concentration of power has various disadvantages, such as reducing the government's ability to adapt, which is not conducive to mobilizing the enthusiasm of subordinates, and officials want only cater to their superiors for their own future. But there are also good aspects, such as ensuring the unity of the overall policy and the speed of decision making. Now, there are enough advantages for the United Kingdom, that is, as long as a few people such as the Romanian monarch can be persuaded, they can be pulled into the camp. In order to make the war end as soon as possible, and for the layout after the war, I think it is of sufficient interest for us to agree to Romania's conditions now. In the face of Churchill's words, there are still voices of disapproval, and Foreign Secretary Belfort has different opinions. "Mr. Churchill, I think your proposal still has many details that need to be negotiated. For example, Romania's separation of power and obligations in the Balkans after the war, its attitude towards the Russian Red regime, and its willingness to form an intervention army. Something that cannot be taken lightly. Balfour's words made Churchill scolded, and the foreign secretary was confused. For the Russian Red regime, he was a well-known hardliner in British politics. However, he can still sort out the priorities. To discuss these matters with Romania now will only increase the difficulty, and is not conducive to the progress of the negotiations. Does the foreign secretary still think this is the Victorian era? Churchill thought of this, sorted out the language, and said it a little angrily. Gentlemen, what we need to see now is the benefits of Romania's participation. I don't think its shortcomings should be discussed now. We have spent too much manpower and money in this war. If it drags on, will allow us to have more challenges around the world. And the purpose of our war is not to find more competitors for ourselves. Churchill's words made Prime Minister David George feel that they couldn't let their discussions go on like this, and he ended the conversation. Gentlemen, I don't think it's our country's business for Romania's accession conditions. I believe Paris must be more anxious than us. I think we can wait for news from France. Prime Minister George's words made Churchill even more anxious, and he spoke to him in an eager tone. But Mr. Prime Minister, if we wait for the news from France, then we can't seize the opportunity. You must know that the Serbs have already received strong support from France. After the war, it is estimated that Serbia will pay more attention to the voice of France. But you must also note that France's losses in the war. My quartermaster, you are too eager. Finally, Prime Minister George ended the discussion of the government, and everything was mainly waiting for news from France. As a result, they did not wait any longer, and France sent its own decision the next day. This made Churchill indignant, feeling that his proposal was completely ignored. https. Please remember this book's first domain name. Mobile version reading website. Chapter 292 Preparation. 1. Although Churchill's proposal did not pass, Britain and France had decided to satisfy Romania's appetite and relieve their pressure on the Western Front. So 3 days later, the British and French ambassadors informed the Romanian side of the news. After receiving the news, Edel called Prime Minister Brătianu, Foreign Minister Bănescu, Army Minister General Courtois, Chief of General Staff General Prezhan, and others to the palace. After summoning all his important officials, Edel set the tone. As soon as he spoke, everyone, the Allies have agreed to Romania's conditions. Now we need to focus on the secret mobilization of the military militarily, and we also need to stabilize the Allies diplomatically, to buy time for our mobilization. In the face of the king's strong tone, none of the ministers present said a word. They were old fritters who knew the importance of time to Romania. Moreover, the king's judgment on the situation has always been accurate in recent years, which is why they have always trusted him. After seeing that the ministers had no opinion, Edel asked by name, Admiral Ploiesti, do your military have any requirements for the Entente? Facing Edel's inquiry, Ploiesti, a representative of the army, has a lot of requirements, but now he can only pick up the important ones. Your Majesty, we have a lot of demands from the Entente, but the most important thing is the cooperation between the allied troops in Greece and us. Facing the words of Ploiesti, Edel also admitted it. It's really a question of whether we can open up the situation in the region. Please rest assured, Chief of the General Staff, I will let Foreign Minister Bănescu make our request. Seeing that Ploiesti was still a little unfinished, Edel, the king, moved in his heart and took another sentence. It would be best if your army can send someone to participate in the negotiations, so that you can help when discussing military issues with the Allies. After seeing the king say what the army wanted, Admiral Ploiesti thanked him. Thank you, Your Majesty, for your interest in the military. We will definitely send professionals who understand the military to assist in the negotiation. Facing Prezhan's actions, Edel knew the whole story. Because Romania declared war on the Allies, the most pressure was on their military. In the face of more than 1 million battle-hardened allied troops, the talented staff officers of the General Staff were almost overwhelmed. Because Romania can be called the elite and has confidence to resist the German army and its counterattack, only a standing army of 400,000 people, and the militia and the reserve can only resist the attack of the Austro-Hungarian army at most. In addition, the weapons and ammunition stored in Romania can last up to half a year according to the state of the Western Front, which makes the military very troubled. Then getting it from one's own allies has also become the consideration of the military point. In fact, this is also the reason why the General Staff has the least number of people in the Bulgarian direction, but most of them are elite troops. Romania is in great need of the Allied aid, both in military and in material point. Some people may ask why we can't produce more, which has a lot to do with Romania's military industry. Before the outbreak of the war, Romania's main military enterprise, the Bucharest Arsenal, had an annual production capacity of 150,000 guns, 400 to 500 artillery pieces, and 400,000 tons of various ammunition. However, it is impossible to compare the production capacity of the two camps. It must be known that the annual output of ammunition of the various powers at that time was 2 million tons. Moreover, the training of soldiers requires ammunition. In addition, the production of weapons and ammunition is a scarce material, and it is also very inappropriate to buy during wartime. After the war, Romania needed to capture the Transylvania region. To relieve its defensive pressure point, then more ammo is needed. This is why Romania has a reserve of 1.4 million tons of ammunition, but the General Staff only thinks it can fight for half a year. Why is this result? The basis given by the General Staff is the ammunition consumption of Britain and France on the Western Front. Britain and France can produce more than 2 million tons of ammunition each year, and they can fight no more than 3 major battles a year. Of course, in addition to several major battles that consume ammunition, there are usually other consumptions, but several major battles on the Western Front accounted for most of the ammunition consumption of Britain and France, and Germany, as its opponent, was no exception. Turning over the Battle of the German Army in World War I, it will be found that except for the beginning of the Battle of the Marne, August 30th, and the Battle of Tannenberg, August 25th, the outbreak of the East and West Front battles were all alternated. This is also because the material reserves of the German army can only maintain high-strength operations in one direction, which also caused the German battle on the East-West line. The Romanian military also saw the plight of Germany, so in order to allow itself to have enough military supplies, it became a top priority to defeat Bulgaria to open up the connection with the Allies. After questioning the military, Edel turned to ask the Prime Minister. The government needs to be prepared after the declaration of war. In the face of Edel's words, Prime Minister Brătianu, as the head of the government, must make a statement, only to see him stand up and speak. The government is already preparing for this, and it won't hold back. The understatement of the Prime Minister's answer does not mean that the government has less work to do. In fact, this work has almost made the hair on the Prime Minister's head, which is not much, tend to become more sparse. The main reason is that Romania's economy is highly consistent with Germany and Austria, plus there are many German and Austrian capitals in its territory. How to define these capitals after the outbreak of the war is a difficult problem for the government to consider at the beginning of 1917. According to the statistics of the Romanian government, 27% of Romania's large-scale enterprises had German and Austrian capital, and 9% of them were solely owned by them. Among the industries involved in the Austrian capital, grain processing, transportation, machinery processing, etc. are the main targets of its investment. Moreover, according to the government's investigation, the investment of German and Austrian capital in Romania has reached £124 million, while the sum of Britain, France, and Russia is less than £40 million. When this report was sent to Edel, he knew that DIA had done a lot in Romania. A quarter of workers need to rely on German and Austrian capital for food, which makes Romania too involved. If it wasn't for knowing that the Allies would win, Edel would not dare to declare war on Germany and Austria, because it would cause chaos in his own country. Therefore, disposing of DIA's capital in Romania has become a major difficulty for the government. In particular, Romania continued to obtain technology, equipment, and talents from Germany and Austria after the first stop, so it could not learn from the United States, Britain, France and other countries to confiscate them, which also exacerbated the reduction of the Prime Minister's hair. The difficulty of disposing of German-Austrian capital made the Prime Minister troubled. And after the military mobilization, How to quickly transform Romania's economy into military services is also a headache for him. Chapter 293 Preparation 2. General military mobilization has been quite skilled in European countries. From the Franco-Prussian War, Prussia, with its leading global mobilization mechanism, quickly defeated France, which was superior in population and national strength, and has been imitated by other countries by the time of World War I. The mobilization mechanism of various countries was already very sound, but Germany was still the most adequate for mobilization. With its mobilization rate of 10% of the population, it beat the mobilization rate of other powers by 4 to 5%. This is also the main factor for Germany to be able to unite with Austria-Hungary to destroy Russia on the Eastern Front, while being able to share the same situation with Britain and France on the Western Front. The situation Romania is currently facing requires a mobilization rate of 12% to deal with the current situation. Fortunately, Romania has a good economy now and has the financial resources to allow the military to do this. But for Romania, which currently has a population of only 10 million, it was all about mobilization from the beginning. However, in order to maximize the interests of Romania in his heart, Edel, the government, and the military put forth their best efforts. So at the meeting, both the government and the military are rushing to the problems they need to solve. As the issues came up with solutions one by one, the question of war was soon resolved. Until the end of the meeting, Prime Minister Brătianu proposed, "Your Majesty, in order to ensure a smooth negotiation, I think a high-ranking official should be dispatched to negotiate in person." Now relying on telegrams will have hidden dangers. Seeing the Prime Minister frowning and expressing concern, Edel asked after taking a look at the Foreign Minister, "Prime Minister, who do you think is the right person?" In the face of the King's inquiry, Prime Minister Brătianu said without looking up, "His Excellency the Foreign Secretary is the most suitable candidate." Edel listened to the Prime Minister's words, looked at Bănoș, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and asked, "What do you think?" Foreign Secretary. Facing Edel's question, the Foreign Minister in his 50s spoke in a cautious tone, "Your Majesty, I very much agree with the Prime Minister's proposal. It's just that His Majesty needs to decide on the candidate." Hearing what Bănoș, the Foreign Minister, said, Edel couldn't help but feel happy. This old slit knows that the Prime Minister is unlikely to walk away to negotiate in person at this time. In addition to him, who is a foreign minister who is proficient in diplomatic negotiations, is it possible to send other people? Although he criticized the foreign minister in his heart, Edel still agreed with the Prime Minister's proposal. The negotiation was all telegrams, and it was easy to leak. It would be better for the Foreign Secretary to negotiate in person. I agree with the Prime Minister's proposal, so I'll ask the Foreign Secretary to make a trip in person. After seeing that the King agreed to the Prime Minister's proposal, Bănoș, the Foreign Minister, was elated. He knows the importance of this negotiation. Whether it is for fame or real gain, he must participate in it, which is why he personally went to the Prime Minister's house to negotiate the day before yesterday. Looking at the excited Foreign Minister, the Prime Minister, who just made a proposal, is much calmer. In his opinion, the military is going to increase its power in the next period of time, and this period of time is not short. Because in the eyes of Prime Minister Brătianu, the failure of the Allies has become inevitable. Then, the military forces that rely on the victory and soaring must be contained by the government, so the credit for the negotiation can only be taken by the government alone, which is why he agreed to the Foreign Minister. The military is of course dissatisfied with the government's move to dominate the negotiations. However, as the three giants of the military, Ploiesti and General Courtois, of course, know the importance. The war situation they are facing has already made them breathless, and they have no intention to put it on at all. And they know that, as long as the war is won, then the military's power will inevitably rise. After all, the expansion of territory requires the army to fight. The meeting didn't end until the beginning of the Huadeng. After watching the important ministers who left after the meeting, General Ploiesti, who was the chief of the general staff, also packed up and prepared to go back to the general staff. There are still several military problems and so on. The staff solved it. He needs to go over to supervise it. His Excellency Chief of Staff, Your Majesty asked you to wait for a while. A squire whispered to Ploiesti. This slowed down the chief of staff's tidying up, and after declining the invitation of his military colleagues to leave together, Admiral Puri, who was dragged to the end, saw the king in another lounge. Edel, who covered his face with a hot towel to relieve his fatigue, asked the chief of staff, "I heard that you have an unsolvable military problem now." Hearing the king's question, Admiral Pulishan answered with no surprise at all, "Yes, your majesty, there is a thorny problem that haunts us now." The problem that Admiral Pulishan mentioned was not only a thorn, but also quite a thorn, almost making Pulishan, the head of the general staff, unable to sleep at night. So what is it that makes the chief of general staff so restless? In the final analysis, it is still a question of the speed of Romania's mobilization. In addition to the existing military forces, Romania's mobilization of the militia is completed in 5 days, and ammunition and equipment are ready within 10 days. The speed of this gathering is quite fast even in Europe. Of course, this is not the source of Pulishan's headache. The reason for his headache is the mobilization of the second batch of reserves. Its 15-day build rate and 20 to 25 regular ammunition time are too long, and this time will make the Romanian army run into the Allied army waiting in line. This is the result of repeated calculations by the elite staff of the general staff, based on the basis of the reaction time of the Allied armies. Among them, the German army has a 7-day reaction time, the Austro-Hungarian army has a 12-day response time, and the Bulgarian army has a 14-day response time. It took nearly a month for the Romanian army to be fully prepared, which made Pulishan completely unacceptable. But with the current traffic and weapons stockpiles, there is no way that this time will be reduced. Some people may ask why it cannot be mobilized in advance. Those who say this are completely laymen. Once the mobilization order starts, nearly 12% of the people in the country walk into the barracks, unless they are blind, who can turn a blind eye. And Romania and Germany and Austria have such close economic ties. As soon as there is trouble, the news will arrive in Berlin and Vienna the next day. And Edel also knows the plight of the military, but he has no good way to do it. After all, there are many things in the military that he does not understand very well, and it is difficult to give any advice. Still, he made a suggestion. Then have you tried to form a battalion first, and go directly to the destination, to solve the problem of higher organization? In the face of Edel's suggestion, Admiral Pulishan spoke up. "Your Majesty, our general staff has also considered it, but doing so will do more harm than good." Facing the practice of Romania in his previous life, the chief of staff continued to explain. "Your Majesty, this will increase the transportation pressure on the front line. Moreover, it is not advisable militarily to prepare the army near the front line. If it is attacked during this period, its losses will increase." Edel was not angry when he saw that his suggestion was rejected by Admiral Pleasant. Edel asked while looking at the lounge, where there were only 2 people, "Chief of the General Staff, can you tell me how much confidence you have in this war?" Pleasant knew that this was the king's worry about the future war, and he said, after thinking about it, "I'm only 60% sure of taking Transylvania, but as long as we take that area, then we have 8 levels of certainty that we can win this war. Okay, then go get ready. If necessary, in order to capture Transylvania, you can mobilize the defense army in Moldavia. Rest assured, Your Majesty, I will make the Romanian flag fly over Transylvania." Looking at the leaving chief of staff, Edel was also melancholy. Chapter 294 Preparation 3. Preparations for war in Romania also began as soon as possible after the meeting chaired by Edel. Large quantities of military material began to be disguised for other purposes and shipped to various military points in Târgu, the first station of the RU railway into Romania. 2 staff members in the dispatching room of the station were chatting. "Hi, Som. You're saying there's too much cargo these days. Our station has been running for several days in a row." "Yes, our station warehouse is almost full, but I heard that the goods shipped this time are more valuable." "I know that you have a connection with tourists, so don't mess with the idea of these goods. It's not easy to see the people guarding the goods. It's very likely that they are all veterans after someone's mind was broken." He was speechless, but he listened to his colleague's words, which saved him from a disaster. At the same time in Paris, after 3 days of secret travel, Barnosk, the foreign minister as plenipotentiary, was also about to arrive in Paris. In this secret trip to Paris to negotiate, Barnosk did not bring any extra candidates, except for a few elite personnel from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the representative of the military Major General Dotov. The Major General's main task is also to coordinate the Allied forces in Greece and attack Bulgaria. The road trip did not make the foreign minister in his 50s feel too tired. He was chatting with Major General Dotov about the customs he saw along the way. I still remember the experience of studying in France, when France was not so desolate, and I didn't see many men along the way. Yes, France has lost too much in this war, even if it costs too much to win. Feeling a little out of place. To talk about his losses on French soil, Major General Dotov decided to change the subject. French men are on the battlefield, but French women suffer. According to the personal experience of our military observation team, a few cans and a bag of flour in France can make French women show their enthusiasm. If they are in the war zone, that bag of flour can be omitted. Just then a negotiator knocked on the door and came in to speak. Your Excellency, Paris is here. So the two got off the train. As the capital of France, Paris can be regarded as its largest railway transportation hub. Materials from all over the country can arrive here along the railway, which has also become the largest logistics base of the French army. The negotiating group from Romania felt this in a short period of time. Within 10 minutes after they got off the train and walked out of the station, 3 reinforcement troop trains singing the Marseillaise crossed the platform and headed for the front line, and there were also 2 wounded vehicles dripping with blood and full of mourning. Drive behind. In just over 10 minutes, the Romanian group, who was still in peace, immediately felt the cruelty of the war. At the same time, they also noticed that the staff up and down the station turned a blind eye to this kind of scene. This made the negotiators feel that the hearts of the French people are strong. One more thing. This time the Romanian negotiator was greeted by French Foreign Minister Jane Pichon, which also represented the importance attached by the Entente countries to Romania's ability to join at this time. After observing all the way, Barnosk, the Romanian foreign minister, has a deep understanding. Whether it is from the reception level or the itinerary, it is to allow their group to arrive in Paris faster and more comfortably. This departure from Marseille, it can be seen that the train has temporarily added luxury carriages in order to wait for them to stop for 2 hours. Although France has prepared so much for the Romanian negotiating delegation, however, Barnosk, who was the plenipotentiary representative during the negotiations, would not be grateful for this and give up his interests, but he was not polite at all when he should compete. Gentlemen, the Kalash area has always been a gathering place for our Romanian people, and there are not many Serbs in the area, and no matter what aspect it is inconsistent with the previous negotiation situation. I hope you can understand. The situation on the ground raises questions. Barnosk, the plenipotentiary, bragged in the face of French Prime Minister Clemenceau, Foreign Minister Jane Pichon, Army Secretary Paul Penrevel, and British Foreign Secretary Balfour, because the negotiations were out of the beginning. What a moth. I don't know why, but the British Foreign Secretary, Balfour, repented of the conditions he had promised. As soon as he came up, he questioned the Austro-Hungarian Kalash region that should belong to Romania next to Serbia. On the grounds that the local Serbs occupy the majority, he proposed that the region should undergo national self-government after the war, which was immediately recognized as the plenipotentiary. Grams rejected. He didn't care at all whether the Serbs were the majority in the area. Barnosk insisted that the local Serbs were a minority. This was a mistake by the British Foreign Secretary, showing a completely unreasonable attitude. Seeing this situation, the other French country in the negotiation is a little bit restless. For the question of the Kalash region suddenly raised by the United Kingdom, France has no preparations at all, but now they can only make a deal first. And this task can only fall on Jane Pichon, Minister of Foreign Affairs. I saw him say after a light cough, "The two of you, I think we should put aside the Kalash regional issue first. Let me make a suggestion here. Seeing that both sides want to hear their own opinions, Minister Jane Pichon said, why don't we have a 1-year deadline after the end of the war, and if the Romanians are in the majority then do as Lord Barnosk said, and if the Serbs are in the majority then do as Lord Balfour said." Okay. Jane Pitchen's overtones, of course. Barnosk, the Romanian foreign minister, heard it clearly. This is who will be in the hands of the Kalash region. After thinking about the current situation of the two countries, he immediately listened to him, opened his mouth. I agree with Minister Jane Pitchen. I agree. 2. In the face of Minister Jane Pitchen's partiality to Romania, Belfort actually agreed. Seeing that the British were not doing anything wrong, the French representative who negotiated was also relieved. Now France has lost too much and needs new troops urgently. Who let the German army focus on the French army in several consecutive battles on the Western Front. 2/3 of Germany, France, of course, couldn't take it. You must know that there have been many cases of soldiers in the French army refusing to go to the front, but they were all suppressed by the French government. But this also shows the state of the French army. Chapter 295 Preparation. 4. This is absolutely not possible. Our ammunition is completely insufficient, and you should see that the 80,000 tons of ammunition we provide per month is already the limit. Negotiations are still going on. The French Minister of the Army, Paul Pan-Ruiz, said this, and he completely refused when faced with the Romanian Lion's open request for 250,000 tons of ammunition per month. In his words, if Romania's demands were complied with, then the French army would not have to fight. The one who answered the minister was Major General Dotov, the Romanian military representative, and the Major General spoke up. Minister Panleve, of course we have a better understanding of the pressure on the Western Front, but we also hope that you can see the plight of our Romania. We are facing the state of being surrounded by allied countries. Except for the Black Sea, we are in every aspect the enemy, and we have to prevent attacks from the Black Sea, which is too stressful for us, and we don't have enough ammunition in stock. Speaking of this, Major General Dotov made an ambush and continued to talk. Our Romanian military currently only reserves 1 million tons of ammunition, which is not enough to fight for 3 months according to the current intensity of the Western Front. But you can't reach the intensity of the Western Front. Seeing that Major General Dotov had a worse trend, Admiral Pétain, who had already served as the commander-in-chief of the French army, spoke out about the difference. This negotiation was initiated by Pétain, who is now interested in every job that can relieve the pressure on the French army. He saw too many casualties at the Battle of Verdun, and the cost of pulling up a division was calculated in hours. Therefore, after taking over the post of commander-in-chief, Pétain showed great enthusiasm for finding reinforcement and letting the British take over the defense of more important areas. At present, his performance seems to be very good. The British Army has taken over many important positions. For example, the Somme region has been completely accepted by the British Army. Yes, Your Excellency. But we can fight for up to 5 months in the face of 3 directions. In the face of Pétain's point of difference, Major General Dotov generously admitted it. But I believe that you didn't let us join the camp just to let Romania defend the front, right? In the face of this eloquent Romanian military representative, French Army Minister Paul Pan-Ruiz immediately answered, of course not. We also hope that the Romanian army can fight bravely and make greater contributions to defeating the evil deer, but we really can't meet your requirements for ammunition materials. Major General Dotov asked after thinking. Then how much material and ammunition can you give? After hearing the words of Major General Dotov, Minister Panlev and Admiral Pétain discussed it quietly. We can only give 100,000 tons of material and ammunition per month at most. If this does not meet your requirements, then you can choose to defend against the attack of the Allies. Major General Dotov heard the amount of supplies given by the Allies and said it, after thinking for a while. Then go with that number. After Romania and the Allies negotiated the aid of military supplies, there was only one last issue left to be resolved, and that was Bulgaria, which lay between the two sides. As a supporter of the military power of the Allies on the southern front, Bulgaria has mobilized no less than 1 million people. For Bulgaria, which has a population of only 5 million, it can be regarded as a whole country. Regardless of the combat effectiveness of the mobilized soldiers, the mobilization rate of more than 20% is the highest among the participating countries. However, the domestic situation in Bulgaria, which has mobilized such a force, is not very good. Too many people have joined the army and are not engaged in production. As a result, the crops in Bulgaria have failed year after year in the past 2 years, and domestic dissatisfaction has intensified. When it comes to the coordinated operation of Bulgaria, Major General Dotov immediately asked the topic that Romania is most concerned about now. According to the proposal of our two sides to work together, our attack on Bulgaria needs your army in Greece to contain it first. I wonder how long you can contain it. In the face of Major General Dotov's inquiry, this topic was immediately taken over by Admiral Pétain. Our army in Greece is no stronger than Bulgaria's. You must know that there are 460,000 Bulgarian troops facing us in Thessaloniki, and there are 250,000 second-line troops in Ser, Zlama and other places behind it. And there are only 430,000 troops in Greece, and it is completely impossible to fight. Your Excellency Petain, those second-line Bulgarian troops are actually completely unconcerned. The weapons they are equipped with are already 30 or 40 years old, and most of the artillery is old-fashioned. There are also many bronze cannons. I don't think you need it at all. Be careful. Major General Dotov said another topic at the same time. And you have no less troops in Greece than in Bulgaria. Facing the topic that Major General Dotov suddenly threw up, Admiral Pétain shook his head. I have calculated accurately. We only have so much of the local army. In the face of Pétain's words, Major General Dotov said, Your Excellency, you still have an army on Greek soil, and they have been here for 2 years. Faced with Dotov's words, Pétain immediately remembered that Romania wanted the Serbian army to join the attack on Thessaloniki. In fact, 2 years after the retreating army of Serbia was retrained in Greece, this army, which had only 160,000 troops at the time, now has 180,000 people. Britain and France have fought their ideas more than once, but they were all rejected by the Serbs, and they only participated in the battle to restore the country. This gave Britain and France a big headache, and now the mention of Major General Dotov makes Pétain quite excited. Pétain immediately began to think about the use of this Serbian army. As for the reason for its participation in the war only to restore the country, Pétain ignored it at all. There is nothing more important than reducing the French army. In his view, this is just an excuse. If they were not concerned about Russia's attitude before, they used Britain and France to rectify them with great efforts. These Serbian troops have no excuse to say anything else. Now that the Romanian representative has named 180,000 Serbian troops, then they have no reason to refuse, unless they don't want to get their share after the war. But Major General Dotov obviously not only surprised Pétain, he also surprised Belfort. And I think the Anzac in Egypt can actually join the European battlefield. First to defeat Bulgaria, and then to defeat the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which is much more useful than in the Middle East. The Anzac Corps that Dotov said was the main force of the British army in Egypt. The army that had taken Jerusalem was also called the Oceania Corps, because most of its soldiers were from Australia and New Zealand. Now that Romania has their idea, this also makes the Foreign Minister Belfort, who has not spoken at the beginning, a little overwhelmed. Still a little confused. He spoke. I didn't bring military personnel this time, so I can't answer your question. Seeing the departure of the British negotiator, the French representatives who have already gained a lot from this negotiation have also left, and it seems that they will also take time to consider the Romanian proposal. All that was left in the room was the Romanian himself. At this time, Barnosc, the negotiator, stepped forward and patted Major General Dotov on the shoulder. Major General, your proposal is really good. Chapter 296 Preparation 5. The British and French representatives, who were surprised by Major General Dotov's words, soon returned to the negotiating table the next day. It seemed that they had recovered. The only difference was that behind the British Foreign Secretary was a man in general's uniform. This person, Major General Dotov, met through a photo. This is the Commander-in-Chief of the British Expeditionary Force, Admiral Haig, which also shows that the British side attaches great importance to Romania's proposal. This Admiral Haig stared at Major General Dotov and said rudely, I heard Mr. Balfour say that the Major General has an objection to the use of our Anzac army. In his voice, the general also increased his tone on the Major General, and it seemed that he was dissatisfied with the Romanian army who dared to ask the British Empire for too long. In the face of the Admiral's questioning, Major General Dotov did not rush. He was already prepared to deal with this situation at home. The Romanian military has prepared several plans for him in response to this situation. Your Excellency, I do not intend to offend the use of the British Empire in the military, but to propose more feasible solutions. Major General Dotov stopped here, took out a map, and pointed to the location of Bulgaria. Look, gentlemen. Dotov's move surrounded the negotiators present, especially Admirals Pétain and Haig, because they knew that the Romanian negotiator would be talking about military matters. Sure enough, after seeing everyone gathered around and looking at him, Dotov said his intentions. Gentlemen, Bulgaria is the easiest country to defeat among the allies, and its location is also very important. He is the main point of railway transportation connecting the Ottomans and Germany. The weapons and equipment from Germany are continuously sent to the Ottomans, and the Ottomans are sent to the Ottomans. Raw materials are also sent to Germany through here, which makes the powerful fleet useless. Hearing Dotov's words made the British and French negotiators secretly hurt themselves. The actual situation is similar to what the Romanians said. Most of the Ottoman weapons and equipment are from Germany, especially most of the weapons captured by the Ottoman troops in the Middle East battlefield are in Great German. Raw materials such as wool, cotton, and copper mines from the Ottomans also strongly support Germany's military and light industries. In the face of Dotov's face-saving words, French Foreign Minister Jane Pitchen took over and asked, "Indeed, as Your Excellency said, then you mean?" Dotov cast a grateful look at the French Foreign Minister, who answered the question very well. He went on to say that it is exactly what we mean in Romania, which is to get Bulgaria out of the war. First point here, I will tell you what we have learned. At present, the domestic situation in Bulgaria is the most severe, and its domestic materials are quite tight, especially food and textiles that are related to people's livelihood. Especially in Bulgaria's Kardžali, Haskovo, there has been a famine in other places, and the local people have begun to flee. Moreover, Bulgaria's military strength is also the weakest, and it is easy to be defeated by us at this time. Pétain, the commander-in-chief of the French army, raised a key question. What if our attack draws reinforcement from the German and Austrian troops? Pétain's words made many people who were intrigued by Dotov put their minds back. When the Allied powers attacked Bulgaria, Germany and Austria would certainly not sit idly by. Just as if Russia had withdrawn from the war, reinforcement would be inevitable. Hearing Pétain's question, Dotov said with a smile, "Your Excellency, there is no need to worry about German and Austrian reinforcement. For the smooth implementation of the Bulgarian campaign, we decided to launch an attack on the hinterland of Austria-Hungary to contain its actions." He pointed to a point on the map. The Transylvania region is our chosen target point. This is not far from the Hungarian plain, one of the cores of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. As long as we Romania attack here, Germany and Austria will definitely be reinforced, then the Bulgarian campaign can start smoothly. Major General Dotov's words surprised the British and French negotiators present. They did not expect that Romania planned to attack first, and it was on the Transylvanian plateau, which was easy to defend and difficult to attack. This made Admiral Pétain couldn't help asking, "You are sure to attack the Transylvania plateau, which is not easy to fight?" In the face of Pétain's kind reminder, Major General Dotov responded, "Thank you for your concern. We still have a lot of confidence in attacking this area, because most of the local people are Romanian, so we have the confidence to attack this area." Seeing that the Romanians were very confident, Admiral Pétain was reluctant to talk too much. If Romania backs down, then Bulgaria will not be able to expand, and it will be depressing. However, there are still people present who guessed Romania's intentions, but as long as it does not affect the Bulgarian strategy, Romania's careful thinking has not been broken. It can be said that this is the skill of language. If it is said that Romania is preparing to attack the Transylvania region and then attacking Bulgaria, it will inevitably be considered as a cover for Romania by the Allies. Now, on the other hand, Romania has become a cover for the Entente. In fact, the effect is the same. This is the skill of speaking. What Major General Dotov said made the representatives of Britain and France very interested. Even Admiral Haig, who was a little guilty at the beginning, also asked carefully about the main points of the Bulgarian campaign. It can be seen that the Commander-in-Chief of the British Expeditionary Forces also moved. Seeing that Major General Dotov was discussing matters related to the Bulgarian campaign with Admirals Petain and Haig, Barnosk, who was a plenipotentiary, approached representatives of the British and French governments to discuss other assistance to Romania. You must know that Britain and France, as veteran powers, still have a lot of good things that make Romania envious, such as the new British and French aircraft. It is irritating to say that Romania now has Goshawk fighter jets and newly developed Samurai bombers. Faced with the research and development capabilities of Britain and France, they are gradually lagging behind. So this time the military plans to introduce such as the British C-5 fighter jets and French fighter jets. Camel fighter. In addition, the most coveted in Romania is the French Schneider 155 artillery. The latest improved model of this artillery makes the Romanian military drool. This French Schneider 155 howitzer is far more than the German 150 howitzer currently equipped in Romania, whether in terms of range, 11,900 meters vs 8,500 meters, or the muzzle velocity of the artillery, 450 m/s vs 325 m/s. The downside is that the weight is much heavier than the German artillery, but this is nothing for the Romanian army whose center of gravity is on the Ukrainian plains and the future. The negotiation in Romania went very smoothly. Neither Britain nor France were too entangled in the planning of the Bulgarian campaign militarily, or in the introduction of military technology. It can be seen that they are urgent for the Romanian army to participate in the war. Finally, after 5 days of intense negotiations, Romania and Britain and France reached a condition for joining the Entente camp, which was soon sent to Bucharest. PS. I want to say something here on Mantou. I'm sorry everyone. I've made you watch the update of my Buddhist system for so long. As for the recommended monthly pass, I don't have the face to ask for it. Everyone is free to do what they want. Now that I have recovered, I will try my best to guarantee 2 updates every day. Chapter 297 Preparation 6. In the Romanian Prime Minister's office, Andrei is waiting for his leadership outside the Prime Minister's door. As a top student less than 10 years after graduating from the University of Bucharest, his current job is simply a dream. Yes, Andrei, in his early 30s, was working as a secretary, but he was working as a secretary for Briceanu, the top man in the government. In addition to his excellent personal ability, Andrei's family has a great relationship with the Prime Minister when he got this position. Otherwise, apart from being the captain of the guard for the king, why can he get this position? That is considered to be the second shortcut. At this time, Andrei saw the Minister of Industry Karachari coming out of the Prime Minister's office. He immediately knocked on the door and walked in. Seeing the slightly tired Prime Minister, Andrei asked softly, "Prime Minister, Home Secretary Vintila is already waiting. Do you need to make him wait?" After hearing the words of his secretary, Prime Minister Briceanu rubbed his cheeks and spoke to him. "Andrei, you can ask Wendila to come in. There are a lot of things that need to be dealt with by his Ministry of the Interior." After hearing the Prime Minister's order, Andrei went out immediately and planned to invite Wendil Briceanu, who also belonged to the Briceanu family. Watching Andrei, who had been his secretary for 2 years, leave, Prime Minister Briceanu was thinking about where his secretary would go. It's not that the Prime Minister is dissatisfied with his secretary. In fact, since Andrei has been his secretary for 2 years, Briceanu, the Prime Minister, is also very satisfied with his serious and close-minded performance. But as Prime Minister Briceanu is planning ahead, because the Briceanu family is currently in an embarrassing state. Except for him and his cousin Wendil, his family's backup talents are not available. In the face of the shortage of talents, Briceanu, the Prime Minister, is not ignorant of the harmfulness of a political family. Therefore, in addition to finding excellent talents to marry, it is also a good way to use the position to form a good relationship. Therefore, Andrei was able to serve as the Prime Minister's secretary for 2 years, which is also the Prime Minister's approval. And before that, the Prime Minister had arranged for 2 secretaries to serve as officials, and the effect was not bad, and the Prime Minister planned to continue. Andrei didn't know the Prime Minister's mind at all, but he looked at the Minister of the Interior who walked into the Prime Minister's office, and felt the difference in his heart these days. Since the Prime Minister came back from a meeting at the palace a few days ago, his work has become more and more busy. He is basically busy until after 10 o'clock in the evening, and these days he has frequently called various cabinet members for meetings. The information of the negotiations is also very secret, even the Prime Minister himself. The secretary could not snoop, so Andrei felt more and more that something was going to happen. When Andrei, who was the Prime Minister's secretary, was a little confused, he was also very busy in the general staff. This is absolutely impossible. Lupina's defenders can't get around at all, and you haven't considered the consequences of the failure of the raid, and the follow-up troops will not be able to keep up with the lack of transportation facilities. This plan can be killed directly. But we can raid Lupina's defenders. The main thing is that we can take it here, and as long as it's successful, we can take Petrosiani without breaking a sweat, and then whether it's northward to attack either blocking reinforcement from Hungary or cooperating with Sibiu eastwards is a great advantage. In the combat office of the general staff, the most elite staff officers from the entire army are arguing fiercely. Colonel Stott, who was the chief of the division, watched the subordinates and the staff arguing, and did not intend to disturb them too much. In Colonel Stott's view, the truth is becoming clearer and clearer, and the battle plan is the same. A battle plan that is discussed without justification is not complete. Now he is looking sadly at the subordinate staff and defending the dispute. But at this moment, a staff officer broke into the combat office and saw him speak loudly. "You don't have to argue. Just got the news that Austria-Hungary has 2 more troops stationed in Transylvania, and one of them is stationed in Petrosiani. The staff officer's words caused an uproar at the scene. Damn. Now the plan at hand has to be redone. It's over. 3 days of hard work is wasted again. At this time, a clever staff member stepped forward and asked the staff member who brought bad news, "And what about another division? Where is the garrison?" The staff officer who was questioned told the truth. "It's just stationed in Sebesh." What? The staff officer's words caused another uproar at the scene. In this way, the Austro-Hungarian army on the southern front has 5 divisions. How can we break through quickly? That's how we break through. Sebs is 24 kilometers from Petrosiani, 20 kilometers from Sibiu, and wherever we attack first, reinforcement will arrive within a day. Apparently the arrangement of the 2nd Austro-Hungarian division made this group of staff members a little discouraged. At this time, Colonel Stout, as the director, needed to come on stage to cheer up his subordinates. I saw him walking up to the group of staff and shouting, "It's all quiet." Facing the roar of his boss, all the staff members stopped arguing and looked at him quietly. Colonel Stott, who was still satisfied with the effect of his words, continued to speak in a passionate tone. "Look at what you still look like. Isn't it that Austria-Hungary has reinforced 2 divisions? It's like the sky is falling. Remember the inference we made before. The worst result is that Austria-Hungary is in Transylvania. Yeah, assembled 500,000 troops, and now it's less than 200,000. Why are you panicking?" Colonel Stott's words made the staff quiet, thinking that his actions just now were indeed a little too panicked, and he didn't have the confidence to be an elite staff officer at all. After seeing that the situation had stabilized, Colonel Stott planned to go back to his office to think about a response plan. At this time, Admiral Pleshin's adjutant found him. "Colonel, the general is looking for you." "Okay, I know. Going right away." Colonel Stott knew that as the chief of the general staff, Admiral Pleshin had something to do with him, that is, to ask himself to come up with a battle plan for Transylvania. It's funny to say that Romania has decided to declare war on the Allied camp, but the Battle of Transylvania, which used the most troops, has not come up with the final battle plan, which makes the battle planners everywhere. The long Colonel Stott's face was dull. But this can't blame him, who made Austria-Hungary's troops in Transylvania continue to grow. From the first 60,000 people, it has now reached 180,000 in a month and a half. This rapid growth has caused the battle plan to be changed again and again. Colonel Stott himself is also very old-fashioned. Stott, how's your work going recently? Do you need to get other departments to cooperate? As soon as Colonel Stott entered the office, Chief of the General Staff pleased and asked with a concerned look, but from the red eyes of the Admiral himself, it could be seen that he was worried. In the face of His Excellency Admiral's concern, Colonel Stott knew that this was urging him to come up with a plan as soon as possible. As the Director of Operations, he also knew when Romania declared war, and now there is not much time left for him. And now he also needs a plan to give the Admiral an explanation. At this moment, Colonel Stott thought of a plan that was shelved by himself. The plan itself was good, but it had the downside of being so bold and whimsical that Colonel Stott put it on the shelf the first time he saw it. However, because of the bold and careful side, Colonel Stott is now also planning to ask His Excellency Admiral for reference. I have a plan here, but it's too bold. I don't know if the general is interested. In the face of Colonel Stott's words, Admiral Prezan suddenly became interested. Tell me the story. Colonel Stott whispered to the general, and please, and also had various expressions when he heard the colonel's words. Even if he has been the chief of staff for many years, he has seen many novel schemes, but he is surprised by this novel and bold scheme. However, after letting go of the surprise in his heart, Ploiesti thought back carefully and felt that the feasibility of this plan was still very high. This plan is not bad. You can continue to make other plans while you improve it, but the time will give you at most half a month. Go ahead and prepare. Admiral Ploiesti finally said that he looked at today's wall calendar, which showed that the time was October, and there was not much time left for Romania. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298 Missed. When Romanian military and political parties began to secretly prepare for war, their various measures would have various reactions, which inevitably attracted the attention of those who were interested, among which Major Habers, the German military attaché, was most concerned. As Germany's intelligence chief in Romania, Major Habers is very interested in the latest Romanian move and is now interviewing a very important informant. As the intelligence chief of a country with huge influence in Romania, Major Habers is also troubled by the expansion of intelligence sources. People who don't know about intelligence work may think that Germany, which has a huge influence in Romania, should have an innate advantage in intelligence, so its intelligence work should also be very good, and Major Habers has the most say. In the opinion of Major Habers, Germany has influence in Romania, but intelligence work is still difficult, even more difficult to do in Romania after the war. Because the Romanians have a good impression of Germany, but it does not mean that he will betray the country for this. Especially when Romania's economy grew explosively after the outbreak of the war and its national strength became stronger, this work was even more difficult to do. Now Major Habers is sitting in a very ordinary cafe in his Macup, waiting for the person he needs to meet. At this time, a customer entered the cafe, and through his steady steps and upright posture, it could be seen that this should be a soldier, or a former soldier. Only Major Habers knew that this was the man he was waiting for, Lieutenant Bergel, a logistics officer in the Romanian General Staff. As a very rare informant who can remain in the General Staff, Lieutenant Bergel also has his own unique way of survival. As an old officer who has been in the General Staff for more than 10 years, Lieutenant Bergel is also well known in the General Staff for being timid, and this characteristic makes him easy to be ignored by people. Because of all the signs in Romania, now Lieutenant Colonel Habers had to use him. Haber, what are you looking for from me? Lieutenant Bergel looked around nervously, and then whispered to the embassy attaché in front of him. It was the moment of the limelight, and he was a little resistant to Lieutenant Colonel Habers' connection. Bergel, don't be so nervous. Seeing the tense look of the lieutenant who played an important role in the intelligence line, Habers spoke soothingly. Habers' consolation didn't work. A Bergerie said, Everything is tightening now, and we shouldn't meet at this time point, but I have something urgent and need your help. Hearing Hubbard's words, Virgil said after taking a sip of coffee to ease his mood. Tell me, what's the matter? In this regard, Hubbard spoke about the topics he cared about. What's wrong with your general staff recently? Of course there is. In the face of Hubbard's question, Virgil said with a self-deprecating manner, your pressure has made the general staff jump, and now a group of staff members are busy formulating a battle plan against you. Hearing this, Hubbard asked, is that plan possible? For Hubbard's questioning, Virgil shook his head and said, that won't do. Why? Because this plan hasn't been done yet. It's impossible for you to want me to steal it. Betrayal continued to speak a little emotionally. And have you considered the risk of stealing the battle plan in the general staff? You must know that the place where the battle plan is stored is guarded by special personnel, and no one can borrow it without the warrant of the chief of the general staff and the chief of operations. I'm an officer in the logistics department. How can I get this for you? Seeing the excited Lieutenant Abijah, Hubbard quickly appeased. Sorry, Virgil, I said the wrong thing. I mean, I hope you can understand the tone of the staff who made the plan, and I will judge for myself. Virgil calms down, considering that the coffee shop is unattractive. But inwardly he scoffed at what Hubbard said. Exploring the air, likely said, the tone of inquiring about the latest battle plan in the general staff, for fear of being unnoticed at this tense time, is a terrible thing for the timid Lieutenant. Virgil. But Virgil also knew that the German military attaché came to him at this tense moment, and it was impossible to communicate without enough information. So he said, after thinking about it, I can only tell you, now that the plan currently being developed within the general staff is about the invasion of Transylvania in Austria-Hungary. The general staff has been working on the battle plan against Austria-Hungary for a long time, and it is normal for only a few words to circulate within the general staff. And it was only fitting that Virgil use the convenience of being a logistics officer to get this news. Hearing the words of the lieutenant officer in front of him, Hubbard already had an answer in his heart, so he continued to ask, can I ask how long this plan has been in place? Facing Hubbard's inquiry, Virgil said disgustedly, how would I know? Hearing Virgil's complaint, Habers also secretly scolded himself that this question was too idiot, so he asked in a different way, how long have you had this news? About 20 days. About 20 days. Hubbard repeated this time in his mind. Hubbard himself was born an officer, and he was familiar with formulating battle plans. Generally speaking, a battle plan that needs to be used takes several months, and it needs to be modified according to different environments. When a bridge is overhauled, it needs to be modified. Therefore, according to Virgil, even the logistics officer of the general staff knew about 20 days. Habers judged that the battle plan Romania was making should not exceed 1.5 months. Because if it is formulated for too long, it is impossible to hide it for too long, and this is not a complete battle plan, so it does not need to be too secretive. In this era, the organizations that formulate combat plans in various countries, not necessarily all of the general staff, have a lot of combat plans for various situations. In addition to fighting aliens, you will find various plans, but these battle plans are basically ashes. Is this your judgment? Later in the day, inside the German embassy, Ambassador Baslober asked, looking at the judgment made by Lieutenant Colonel Habers from the information obtained by Virgil, does this need to be understood to make a decision? Facing the ambassador's question, Lieutenant Colonel Hubbard answered confidently, I don't need your excellency. I'm also an officer, and I have participated in the formulation of various combat plans. From the information we have received, it seems that Romania needs at least 3 months to prepare for military preparation. I have reservations in the judgment. Now, 2.5 months is the limit for Romanians. Seeing Hubbard's extremely confident answer, Ambassador Baslab was not good to say anything. After all, he was not an officer, and he didn't know much about military affairs. The reason why he asked more questions was that when he was about to pass information to Berlin this time, the lieutenant colonel attached his judgment, and the ambassador was concerned to ask because it is customary for the local embassy to attach its own judgment when sending back news or intelligence. Then Berlin will use this as an important reference. After all, the local embassy is better informed. But if the judgment is wrong, the board from Berlin is definitely not light. Out of consideration for my colleagues and myself, it is right for Ambassador Baslup to ask point, but Ambassador Baslup did nothing. It seems that most of this information is about our ally Austria-Hungary, so it should also be told to Ambassador Bell Point. So that night, 2 telegrams with almost the same content were sent to Berlin and Vienna. Chapter 299 Declaration of War. In the early winter, the sun shines on the earth, and in the city of Vienna, which has been wrapped in silver clothes, people who wear thick winter clothes are also busy with their own affairs. You can see from the passers-by on the street that they are not doing well. Most of the pedestrians are wearing old clothes and have disheveled faces. Yes, the food supply in Vienna is very tight at present. According to the survey, the residents of Vienna can get 380 grams of coarse grains per day. That's right, Vienna, the world-famous music capital, cultural city, and political center of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, is now short of food, and it's not a general shortage point in peacetime in Vienna. Apart from the poor people, whoever eats coarse grains will be looked down upon, but now ordinary people can't do it, even if they want to eat coarse grains. This is what happened in Vienna, the capital, where hungry people in other parts of Austria-Hungary even had to rely on alfalfa. Hunger caused turmoil within the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and there were even thieves in many areas. This was after the defeat of Russia and the relief of Russian supplies. If there are no Russian supplies, then the problem in Austria-Hungary is not a security problem, but a political problem. It can also be seen that the current Austro-Hungarian Empire is unable to cope with this war, and this war has consumed too much of it, and it is almost too much to bear. In fact, the 4 countries of the Allied powers are almost overwhelmed. The Bulgarian economy has completely collapsed, and the domestic famine is worse than that of Austria-Hungary. However, it can only survive by relying on its ability to endure hardship more than the Austro-Hungarian people. The same goes for the Ottoman Empire. Now the only hope of the Allies is that the powerful German army, after defeating the Russian army on the Eastern Front, can turn back to defeat France and withdraw from the war, and then negotiate with the Allied powers to keep their gains. This is also the view within the Allied powers about to face Germany's most fatal blow. It is not difficult to explain why Britain and France will give such favorable conditions to Romania, which only participated in the 4th year of the war. Now is the time for Romania to play point. Sitting in the car, the Romanian ambassador to Austria-Hungary Olga was looking at everything Vienna was familiar with, and said with emotion, "Beautiful Vienna, the pearl on the banks of the Danube. I don't know when the next time I will see you." Nothing more than Ambassador Olga lamented that he spent most of his diplomatic career in Vienna, and from the very beginning as the 2nd secretary of the embassy, he forged a rare relationship with Vienna. 2nd secretary, 1st secretary, counselor, and ambassador, he spent his time in Vienna, so he had a very deep understanding of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The relationship between Romania and Austria-Hungary has also been reliant from the very beginning to dull, and then to the closeness of Romania's marriage to Queen Mary of Austria-Hungary, and now the relationship between Romania and Austria-Hungary has reached a new level. 3 days ago, Olga sent a secret telegram from Bucharest. After he took out the code book he kept himself and translated it alone, he got a startling news. The message from Bucharest told him that he was asked to submit it to the Austro-Hungarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs at 6 p.m. on the 5th. Because of the importance of the matter, he also called back to Bucharest for confirmation, and the result was confirmed, and today is November 5th. Early this morning, Ambassador Olga demanded the burning of classified documents inside the embassy, which also caused agitation among the embassy staff. What this move represents is almost obvious to the diplomats. Diplomatic relations between Romania and Austria-Hungary have changed significantly, and for the worst. Ambassador Olga has been monitoring the personnel of the embassy to destroy confidential documents until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because he contacted the Austrian-Hungarian Foreign Minister Count Otto Karolczern the day before yesterday, and will meet him at 6 o'clock this evening. Ambassador Olga also knew about Count Otto Karolczern. The new Austro-Hungarian foreign minister had previously only chaired the Industry and Trade Commission, a department responsible for importing and exporting industrial goods. However, by virtue of his close friend with the new Emperor of Austria-Hungary Carol I, He succeeded Berthold, who had previously planned to declare war on Serbia. This Count Otto Karol Czernin did not see any bright spots in his diplomatic work. The only advantage was being obedient. What Karol said, what he does. Ambassador Alga came to the Austro-Hungarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs at 5:45 and was led by the staff before his foreign minister Count Czernin. Because Romania is one of the few import and a marriage country of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Karol is Eda's brother-in-law, there are many economic and trade and foreign exchanges, so the Count of Czernin and the Ambassador Alga are very familiar. The Earl of Czernin looked a little strangely at the serious-looking Ambassador Alga. Your Excellency Ambassador, are you not feeling well today? Do you need a glass of red wine to relax? Hearing Czernin's words, Alga almost shrugged, but he quickly adjusted and spoke. I'm fine, Mr. Count. I came here today to present a credential point. After he finished speaking, he handed over the credentials in his hand. Count Czernin felt that the Romanian ambassador was a bit strange today, but he did not delay reading the Romanian credentials in his hand. Opening the 4A paper-sized credential, the first letter that came into view caused a dizziness in Count Czernin's head. The word declaration of war made Edel Czernin look terrified, but he quickly reacted. Mr. Alga, are you sure that this was handed over to us by your country? When asked by Count Czernin with the declaration of war raised in his hand, Ambassador Alga answered with certainty. Yes sir, this is what my government asked me to submit. After hearing the reply from Ambassador Alga, Count Czernin began to read his declaration of war. This was prepared after long discussions between Prime Minister Bricianu and Foreign Minister Barnosk. The main content of this declaration of war is, because the Romanian people of Transylvania and Sarabia were humiliated by the Austro-Hungarian Empire and its servant Ukraine, the Romanian King Edel Hohenzollern Sigmaringen, on behalf of the Kingdom of Romania, presented the Austro-Hungarian Empire to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. War was declared, in the hope that the Austrian Emperor and Hungarian King Karol Franz Joseph Ludwig Hubert Georg Maria von Habsburg-Lorraine would seriously consider the Romanian proposal. After reading the contents of the declaration of war, Count Czernin shouted angrily at Ambassador Alga. This is shameless extortion, you won't get what you want, there's no chance. Facing the fiercely reacted Count, Ambassador Alga spoke calmly. Sorry, now our country wants to reclaim these two lands inhabited by Romanians. Edel Czernin looked at Ambassador Alga with a cold expression and spoke with a cold tone. Then if you want to seize these two territories of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, then try the wrath of Austria-Hungary. Ambassador, you can go now, and we will give you 24 hours to evacuate. Seeing Ambassador Alga leaving, Edel Czernin was very nervous, because he remembered that a month ago, the military estimated that its military preparations would take at least 3 months according to the information provided by the Romanian embassy. Although he doesn't know much about the military predicts that mistakes will be a big price, and I just hope that the price won't be too big. Hopefully it's not too late. After Edel Czernin said something anxiously, he immediately called his secretary. Leave and arrange a vehicle. I need to go to the palace in 5 minutes. Go and prepare. In Vienna, when the Austrians declared war on Romania, they were caught by surprise. In Bucharest, there was also a person who was shocked by the news. She was Queen Sophie Mary of Romania. As a Romanian queen who was a member of the Habsburg family before, and is still closely related to it, she naturally cares about the family and country she was born into, not to mention that the current Austro-Hungarian Emperor Karol is still her brother. So when he learned that Romania was going to declare war on Austria-Hungary, he immediately called her husband Edel. Edel, why are you fighting my brother? In Sophie Mary's eyes, this is not a war between Romania and Austria-Hungary, but a battle between her husband and her younger brother, which makes her feel very distressed in the middle. Edel looked anxious and looked at his wife, organizing the language to speak. Mary, listen to me, this war is not what I want to see. In the past 2 months, Austria-Hungary and Germany have asked us to join Romania in their alliance, which all Romania does not want. I just the king of the Romanians, but he can't change their will, so he can only obey them. I believe that the Habsburgs will do the same at this point. Eda didn't want the backyard to catch fire, So he used other places to explain Romania, because his wife, Queen Mary, didn't have a deep understanding of Romanian politics and thought it was the same as the Habsburg. Negotiated decision point: you should dissuade it. This will cause a war between Romania and Austria-Hungary. I don't want to see you and Carol go to battle, and I don't want you two to die. Queen Mary cried as she spoke, with her husband and her brother on the one hand. She didn't know what to do at all. Looking at his crying wife, Edel stepped forward to hug her and comforted her. You can rest assured that I will not go to the battlefield, and I will also order not to allow any Romanian soldier to shoot at Karl. I can guarantee that. Hearing Edel's words, Queen Mary felt much better, and Edel was relieved to see his wife's mood gradually stabilized. At this time, a baby's cry came from the next room, and Edel immediately turned his wife's mind. Mary, Miria is awake. Go and see her. Miria in Edel's mouth is the second child of him and Queen Mary, named Miria von Hohenzollern Sigma Ingen. As a girl, Edel is of course liked, and he intends to be in his life. When she was 5 years old, she would be named Grand Duke, and she would be given a lot of awards. And now that his daughter has solved such a big siege for her father, the reward will be heavier. Edda, after resolving the crisis from home, immediately went to the general staff, where he would be waiting for news from the front. As for going to the battlefield, don't joke. As a king, he has no hobby of going to the front line. I believe that his wife and brother Karl are the same. Chapter 300 Raid 1. On the night of November 5th, when Vienna was in a hurry because of Romania's sudden declaration of war, the county of Deva in Transylvania is still shrouded in peace, because it is the last stop of the railway from Bucharest to Budapest in Austria-Hungary. Its military status is revealed. So in the county of Deva there were a Hungarian division, in Deva, a Czech division, in Petrosini, not far from the border, and an Upper Austrian infantry regiment, in Ilil on the Muurs. From the map, it can be seen that the Czech division on the border is facing the Romanian peak, while the Hungarian division in Deva is in the form of reinforcement, and the Austrian infantry regiment is the second reinforcement target. Of course, this is based on the map, which is defending Romania in a triangle formation, which also shows that the basic quality of the Austrian-Hungarian commander is very qualified. Now the thick night is shrouded in the earth, and most of the Czech division in Petrosini is sleeping peacefully. The reason they are so reassured is that they have strict sentries on the border with Romania, which can monitor the movement of the border at any time. Especially they have 2 companies in the Dira Valley, located on the border as the front. Sentries are stationed to observe. As one of the few important crossings in the southern Carpathian Mountains, the Dila Valley is one of the few river valleys that undulates quite gently. A Dila river originating from the territory of Deva flows through Targu Riu into the Riu River, and then flows into the Danube River, which also makes it the only traffic artery that connects with Romania. The railway from Romania to Central Europe basically passes through here, so its location is very critical. And this is also the only railway in Romania that can lead to Transylvania, which is also crucial for the development of future campaigns. On this winter-shrouded night, a group of people wearing white concealment suits were quietly sneaking in the river valley. This is a specially trained army, as can be seen by its silent behavior in the snow and its lean performance. The army stopped halfway through the valley as a small outpost appeared in front of it. Major, are you going to remove this post, or are we going? At the lurking front of the team, a young officer with the rank of captain asked a middle-aged man who was in his 40s, but still showed a strong aura. By the words of the captain officer, the middle-aged man is a major. With the help of the moonlight and the snow, we can see that the captain who speaks is the Captain Misk who previously served in the 19th Division. And the middle-aged strong man lying beside him, if Sodable and Isidore were there, he would have known each other. Wasn't this Virisi, who was an instructor in the public back then? How did he become a major now? This is actually a long story. When Virisi was seconded to the Volkswagen factory as an instructor, it was because of his mistakes in the army, and then he was called back because of the needs of the army. However, its essence remains unchanged, and the credit for performing various dangerous tasks over the years has been offset by his mistakes. So after more than 10 years, he has been promoted to 1 level. This is still because he is old, and he is afraid that his life will be difficult after retirement in the future. This time, because the task of raiding Petrosini was very important, Major Weresi, who was proficient in raids, assassinations, and explosions, brought a team of elite soldiers to ensure the completion of the task. And Captain Mizik is, because the 19th Division switched to Targaryu, and as the most capable company of the 19th Division, of course, good steel is used on the blade. They cooperated with Major Weresi to take the lead in removing the sentries along the line, laying a solid foundation for the main force to raid. This needs to be said more. The raiding force is not the 19th Division stationed in Targaryu nearby. But in order to ensure the success rate, there will be the 1st Division of the Guards stationed in Craiova, 60 kilometers away, as the raiding force. Through these painstaking actions, it can also be seen that the General Staff attaches great importance to this raid. Now is the time to test them. This is a standard Austro-Hungarian class post, with no more than 15 people in it. In addition to an open post outside the post, there is also a dark post, which is in the haystack next to the post. There should be 2 people on duty inside the post. I'll come. As expected of being proficient in raids, Major Weresi took a brief look at it and told Captain Mizik the result beside him. This shocked Mizik. He didn't expect that Major Weresi could know so much through just a few short observations. Major Weresi ignored Mizik's shock and pointed to 2 of his own team members, indicating that they should clear the 2 light and dark sentries in front of him. I saw the 2 of them sneaking silently towards the sentry post, and the 2 soldiers of the Austro-Hungarian army were completely unaware of the danger and still stared blankly around. At this time, the 2 elite raiders threw a tiger and knocked down the 2 Austro-Hungarian soldiers, then covered their mouths and stabbed them at the heart. I saw that the 2 Austro-Hungarian soldiers began to struggle with their limbs, but they were both held down by the 2 team members. After struggling for 10 seconds, the 2 soldiers did not move. At this time, Major Weresi and the other team members slowly moved forward, and Captain Mizik also followed with his team members. How about it? Do I need to teach you how to solve it? When Captain Mizik led someone over, Major Weresi pointed to the post quietly and asked. In the face of Weresi's inquiry, he knew that Major Weresi had solved the most difficult post, and he only needed to deal with other soldiers who were not vigilant enough. So he nodded to the major and walked into the post with his men. The deputy who stayed outside, who was familiar with Major Vasily, asked him curiously, "Major, why are you being so nice to this captain?" In the face of his deputy's question, Major Vasily said with a smile, "It's mainly because I think his personality is compatible with mine, and I want to give him a chance." In the face of the major's remarks, the deputy did not continue to ask. However, he was also interested in this Captain Mizik for a while, and he planned to take a closer look at what this captain could rely on to get the attention of Major Weresi, who was the most famous in the country for small-scale raid operations. 5 minutes later, Captain Mizik led his men out of the post. By the faint red spots on the sleeves of his team members, he knew the trouble had been solved. Keep going. Major Weresi continued on his way, regardless of whether Mizik's people were comfortable or not. Because this is the first sentry they have solved, they have a very heavy task tonight, and they still need to solve 3 such class sentries. And more importantly, they also needed to raid the station, where the 2 companies were stationed, to lay a good foundation for the troops behind. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.